p.m. We're going to call the workshop back to order. The rest of the afternoon, this session will be open session for discussion on the proposed Constitution Amendment review and discussion. We're going to start out by having Ryan go over the list of issues to have discussion points with us, and then if as needed, we will begin reviewing the constitutional draft. So Ryan needs a minute to connect to Zoom.
All right, while that's connecting, I can get started. I'll pull it up as soon as I get on the Zoom. I did send out to the board, and I will share it for everyone on Zoom, the membership and everything. Just it's an updated issues memo, if you want to call it that, updated from your discussion with former General Counsel. So we can run through kind of some of the high-level issues. Some of them you all had preliminary discussions on. In a lot of the research that we did, looking back at prior workshops and notes from prior legal counsel, some of these didn't get necessarily full direction from the board because legal was supposed to bring back a draft, and I'm not sure. We had a bunch of issues earlier in the year, right, that complicated the cyber event, the settlement, all kinds of things that complicated some of that progress. So I'm not sure what the most recent draft the board had to work on mine that we could recover from former General Counsel was shortly around the time of your January 29th meeting. So that's the most recent notes that we had from your discussions. But number one on my list is separate tribal entities, how that's going to work. The 2008 and 12 drafts of the Constitution had language in them, right, about like a business board to oversee basically commercial operations, commercial entities, gaming, etc. When we get there, the most recent draft has that basic concept in the legislative powers that they can create, like we do now. They can create the authorities. We have a Canadian gaming authority, we have a housing authority, and we have the enterprise authority now newly established, and those powers are retained in the tribal council under the current version, and you will see when we get there at some point, but my computer's going slow, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, because my computer is having
Yep,
troubles.
just a point of information. This that's passed out in our packet is the 2012 that the committee did with no edits? Or
So-
what, just tell us exactly what this document is.
What's in your packet is, there's two, well, I think there's two versions of the Constitution, and I apologize, I think something got double printed. But there should be like a red line, one that has red lines in it. Recent red lines and comments from Josh and I. And then there's one that is, there's no red lines, it's like it's the all track changes accepted for readability, and it's the red line version, but you take away all the comments and edits. It's not the 2012 version in its entirety. It's all those red lines incorporated into a clean version so you can read it easier. Yeah, but it's based off, the baseline that we worked off of was the 2012 version. Does that make sense?
It does, so this is the one, this has some edits in it, though.
Yeah,
From the committee.
it does have,
not the
yeah.
committee,
It is
okay.
not the 2012 or 2008 in its entirety. It's not all the language that Director McGrory and maybe Director Payment introduced in October of 2024. And it's not all the language that Schleicher worked on. It's like a kind of a combination therein of all of those things.
So it's important we read it, okay.
The red line's in the back of your pack. Okay. Aaron.
So, I was out for the workshop last week, so I don't know if we had a conversation. So I've got some comments, but I'll reserve those from when it's appropriate. But the one part that I do want to, I try to get clarified, because I read what we're going over today, and so I'll wait till Ryan can hear this.
I just picked the windows.
So,
Shouldn't I just pick the windows?
yeah, I guess I gotta wait.
That's what I did, but it was showing the whole screen.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Aaron.
It's all right.
sorry. I just didn't want your emails to pop up.
That's the right way to do it.
Yeah.
That's what I did before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So as I recall, where we're at is 2008, the committee made their recommendation. It was unanimous in a memo from Mr. Cosley, who was the chair of the CCC. The 2012 review, because nothing happened from 2008 to 2012, is the board voted to invite back the CCC, but this time added the elder advisory, which is representative of 9 units. And board members then were allowed, board members were not supposed to go to the the initial review that was in our rules. Apparently, board members went to that. I didn't go because we were told we couldn't go. But in 2012, we were permitted to go. A couple board members boycotted and didn't go. But what the 2012 review was of the 2008 work, there were no changes made in 2012. Angeline Bully, the famous firekeeper's daughter out there, did the presentation to the board and went section by section by section. And there were no changes made. But at the end of that process, it was supported unanimously, and we didn't have opposition. That sat from 2012 until, I believe it was Kim Hampton in early of 2024, who requested for the elder advisory to take a look at it again. And so they started looking at it in earnest, did their review, and they voted, and they presented to this board in 2004 their unanimous support for the draft. Now, I want to make that part clear, because then when we start talking about it, when Rob and I put on the agenda a draft which focused exclusively on separation of powers, we limited it to that because several board members basically insisted they won't consider a wholesale amendment, but they would consider individual amendments. So at that time, both Rob and I conceded and brought to the board just the limit to the separation of powers. So then, if you read what Schlehuber prepared for the board in January, it was focusing only on the separation of powers. So we left behind a whole bunch of stuff. And for, I think we had like 4 reviews in public. We only focused on the separation of powers. We didn't focus on any, like Mackinac Band. We didn't focus on at-large representation. Because some of us that support all of that stuff realized that we weren't going to go anywhere because board members wanted to do individual amendments. And that doesn't mean that we won't do those someday, but that's what we had to do in order to move forward. So if you look at what Schlehuber drafted and submitted, and then if you go back and watch the videos, because I think we recorded those, they were public, people were allowed to participate. We limited it to the separation of powers. All those other items were left behind. So, then on July 15, which happened to be my birthday, in Lansing, I brought a resolution because where we had 8 or 7, we had 7. No, I think we had 8, but 7 or 8. Then one board member changed their view and then no longer supported 8, went to 6, which is not enough. Then I conceded that that's better than nothing. But then at the meeting in Lansing, the board voted to get the input from the members on whether they would support a 2-branch or a 3-branch. I went back and watched the tape. It's questionable about whether or not what we voted on was to put to the secretary 2 different versions. But council, both you and also Schlehuber, have advised us repeatedly that it's unlikely that Interior will conduct an election for both. So, but the poll when the poll came back, the poll, 56% of the people supported a 3-branch, 25% supported a 2-branch, and only 19% supported doing nothing. So something very telling in those numbers. 81% support doing something, where for 17 years, we've done nothing, which is not consistent with the will of the people. They expect something to be done. So the question, I think the question should be, are we doing a 2-branch or are we doing a 3-branch? Are we going to prepare 2 separate documents to submit to Interior? Interior is going to respond back to say you can't do 2. They're going to say you got to do 1. So just one final thing I'll say is we are a representative democracy. So I think Kim says this a lot, and it's true. We are. We are elected to represent the interest of the people. It's up to us to interpret what the will of the people is, and I think that's correct, except when we know directly from the people what the will of the people is. And when we conducted the poll, and I didn't have that plan at that meeting at all, I swear, Rob had that all in his head, and I don't think he had it planned, I think he just brought it up. And now we do know what the will of the people is. And the will of the people is pretty resoundingly for a 3-branch government. So I hope that we focus on what the people of this tribe have indicated to us what they want. The difference between 3-branch and 2-branch was a landslide. It's huge. And I venture to guess, I know board members have asked for a breakdown by unit, which is going to be difficult because the election committee posted that there were problems with the unit number on the ballots, so we can't get an accurate count based on what the units. But I will tell you this, because I have a doctorate degree and I have a lot of research in statistics. Based on those numbers, it's going to be impossible that any unit's going to be less than 50% in favor of a 3-branch. So one final thing that popped into my head just the other day is when or if we do a 3-branch, the chair is removed from the council, which means we have an even number of board members. And I can tell you that the committee wrestled through that, the Constitutional Committee and the second review, because it's difficult to have an even split, because how do you break a tie? So they were recommending 3 additional reps. I don't think it's tenable at this time to have 3 additional, although that's on the cost estimate. I don't think that I asked for that. I'm not sure that we should be looking at the cost for 3. That would be 2 at-large, right? A Unit 6 and an at-large. And but we do have to think about either removing a board member number or adding a board member number when the chair moves from the board to the executive branch. So. And now, what would guide us on how to make that decision? The committee, when they reviewed apportionment, a big question through this review was that we are not in compliance right now, and we haven't been probably for all but 2 years of our history. We are not in compliance with the Constitution for the proportion, the number of board members per people. And what the committee came up with was, so I don't know where the camera is, but what the committee came up with is from Unit 4 and Unit 5 west, drawing a line down the middle, which would even out the numbers from Unit 4 and Unit 5. Unit 4 right now is the 2nd largest unit, by far the 2nd largest unit over Unit 3 and all other units except for Unit 1. That split that they proposed, they did that based on the numbers. Then those numbers are probably the same today, but probably more. It would then even those out, which then suggests that Unit 5 receive an additional board member. So if we are either going to reduce to have 11, which I think will be hell, I don't know how we're going to get through that argument, or add 1, but not 3. And if we do, and we go based on apportionment, if we divide those units consistent with what the committee recommended, then we would add a Unit 5 board member. So anyway, that's just lay of the land, and if you don't know what the interests of the people, then it's our job to represent what we think it is, but when you do know what the interests of the people is, then I think it's a sacred responsibility to represent their interests as they've expressed it to us. So that's it.
Rob.
So I'm not sure where the confusion was. for this draft, and I wasn't going to say anything till we got here to this open workshop. But the Constitution amendment that we were reviewing, the one that I drafted, specifically retracted all items that were not necessary to achieve a separation of powers. In Lansing, when I motioned to keep that consistent. I went back and watched the video just to make sure, but I did say the components needed to achieve a separation of powers. So the things that are added back into this draft are going to be controversial, which means that if we were to vote on this draft, members are not going to be voting on the separation of powers. You're going to get people who 100% will support a separation of powers. They will not support redistricting. They're not going to support the membership ordinance. They're not going to support a different makeup of the board. So my intent was to have a draft that was very similar to the one that I created. I know some board members were uncomfortable saying, well, why does Rob get to draft what he wants? Well, any of you could have. But I decided to cede to that and say, okay, let's have legal do it then. Let's have it come from the board as a whole, which I still believe in, that we can do, but we have to take out things that are not necessary to achieve the separation of powers. Members simply want to vote on the separation of powers. That's it. That's what they're demanding. That is the number one thing they've been asking for. That's what we need to deliver. We need to deliver them the opportunity to determine what form of government they want without throwing things into it that are also controversial. Because you're going to get people, a large majority, you just saw 84% of the people who voted in the survey wanted a change. Now, this idea that some people, goofballs online, are saying that a no vote, people who did not vote is a no vote, that's nonsense. Because people who want to vote no show up and vote no. So you can't somehow articulate that because someone didn't vote, they don't want any change. So, you know, the way analytics work is you take a certain amount of the people who did vote and generally assume that that will be the general consensus of if everyone voted, which is normally true when you do surveys. But my main point here is that we need to strip this back down and get the stuff out of there that's controversial and does not have anything to do with separation of powers. Members need and want the right to vote on the separation of powers with no other distractions.
All right, so we're gonna start by letting Ryan go through his list of concerns, and we can debate them one at a time. I'm actually gonna limit debate to 3 minutes per speaker per issue, and we'll take more turns if needed, but we need to get through this. We got 3 hours to do it, and we've already gone 20 minutes with no content. So please begin, Ryan, and then we'll go one at a time. You can ask for direction.
All right. So as I was saying, the first issue, we've talked about it previously, the separate tribal entities, how are they going to be comprised? When eventually we get to look at the draft language and the current amendment to the Constitution, the legislature is the body that these authorities will still be under until that law is changed. The draft Constitution does not currently allow the executive to sit on those boards since they're created under the authority of the legislative branch, just to keep that separation. That was pulled from the 2008 draft, from the workshops you all did, and from Schlehuber's notes, and it's our recommendation. But the first thing, I guess the first question that it was unanswered back in December of last year, and it's still not answered here, is if the board majority will agree that the executive is pulled out of those gaming authorities, enterprise authorities, housing authorities, any future authorities, and leave that with the legislation. That would be true to the intent of the final work product of the Constitutional Committee.
So item number 1, separate tribal entities, where does it belong? Any discussion? Aaron?
It seems like we've made some of the decisions already that are consistent with it. The separation with the economic arm of the tribe is an example of that. The only difference is that it would then become independent of the board of directors. So the board of directors wouldn't be over it like it currently is. But that is the Harvard project model. Joseph Kalt, they actually had his retirement party at NCAI, and those who don't know that, the Harvard model project for economic development is to insulate, and I think you probably know this, to create an independent bodies. However, the board will still have the appropriations authority. So the ultimate authority in a tribe with a separation of powers is who holds the purse strings, and the board will still have that. I think also the board will still have to, and I would support that only the board will be able to waive sovereign immunity. That I know of, the executive branch does not have that authority. It's in, so we've already kind of crossed that threshold with creating the, Sioux Tribe Inc., but then the enterprise board, we've already crossed that threshold, but the difference is they then wouldn't report to the board of directors. They would be free to make free enterprise and independent economic development decisions, not ones that are directed by politics.
And right now, they can, those authorities can waive a limited waiver of sovereign immunity. So it'd be a code change when we get to the separation. Eventually, we're implementing. That'll be a code change to make sure that there's that check where the legislature is the only one who can waive it. We wouldn't probably want our authorities to waive it without affirmation from tribal council, board of directors, whatever we end up calling it.
Any other discussion? Any preference?
Seems like there's no objection to that.
I object
One objection to that.
because they're authorities with boards. Who would sit on the board? One?
So if we get this separation, say we get this in front of the BIA and we pass it in 2026 somehow, or 2027, we'll have to tweak some of our codes, but as it stands, our authority codes, the housing, the enterprise, the gaming, would work substantially with this constitution, save for the executive office, the chairman is no longer supposed to be on the board. I would advise best practice that we get to a point where we're populating those boards not entirely of tribal council, but legally it would work. It's just not best. It's not best practice. So you could, those codes and those authorities can still function if it's tribal council running them. There's no legal issue. There's a best practice issue, really. It's a policy choice. To Dr. Payman's point, we get to that point, I've advised you in the past of separating best practices is not to have a board of directors and seeing all these different entities. I would continue to push for that, but it's ultimately up to the legislature how to craft that code and figure out how to populate those boards.
Lana?
So right now, the chairman is the chairperson of the Gaming Authority Board, the Gaming Commission. Once that separation is instilled, he's the executive, so he's not on the board. He's not on the board anymore.
Correct.
So we would have to figure out who is going to be the chairman of those authority boards, speaker of those authority boards. Okay.
Correct.
And that's outlined in here. Some of that is outlined in this new one, but I guess I'm getting confused in, are we doing an amendment to separate, just to separate out to the three branches, or are we doing a full-fledged constitutional change? Because Rob's saying one thing, which an amendment for us to have a 3-branch government or a 2-branch government, is that the question in front of us, or this whole document? Because now I have people contacting me, just like Rob has just said, about things that they don't agree with in this document. So things are getting out of whack here, and I guess I'm not on the same page. So are we just doing a separation and doing a 3 or 2-branch government, or are we sending this whole document to the BIA? That's a
Well,
question.
eventually you got to figure out what document you're sending to the BIA. I'm not saying that this document that that's in front of you that you're going to look at is going to be the final version. This was crafted pursuant to the resolution in July to be substantially consistent with the final work project of the committee, understanding the points director payment made earlier. So there is language in there that needs to be workshopped by the board on how to deal with a tiebreaker. Right now, the 2008 language that Rob had removed in his amendments last year are in here as a placeholder. This is what the committee wanted. So there's 15 board members. There's at-large board members. This is a policy decision that has to be made. If the consensus is you guys just want 12 and static remains as is, that's fine. You're going to have to eventually legislate, figure out how to do tiebreakers. The Congress, the tribal council would have the ability to create and promulgate their rules for parliamentary procedure by code. So you can legislate around some of these issues. It's not ideal, but it's possible, right? But that's the question that has been outstanding since December. Like, what is the board majority going to send to the BIA? Is it a 2-branch? The survey came back as 3-branch was the dominant choice of everyone who voted. Is it going to be a 3-branch? And what does that look like? Some of what Rob introduced in October did strip away some of the things that may not be necessary, kept some of the 2008 language that maybe isn't also necessary, like the sovereignty section and the preamble, and there's different things that maybe don't need to be in there. That if we just want to take the judicial branch, the legislative branch, and executive branch and plug it into our current constitution and make it fit, that's what we can do. That was not legal department's understanding of what the July resolution did, because that would not be substantially similar to the Constitutional Convention and what their final work product is, but that can be what we decide to do. I can just pull those out, plug it into our current Constitution, advise you of what's in conflict and what needs to change. That's an option. You talked about it with Schlehuber in December of, that being a potential option. He flagged for you, just like I'm flagging for you today. There are things maybe in that Constitution, our current Constitution, that don't quite fit that puzzle, so you still have to adjust some things. The bylaws have to be completely adjusted because a lot of them are incorporated into the language in the different branches now. Like this, I know it's been going on for many, many years, but this is not just like a flip the switch. And there's direction that I know former general counsel never had the chance to get from this board. I'm hoping I can get it from this board so we can get a draft that most of you can agree on. But that's the question, Lana. That's a long-winded answer, right?
Yeah, it is. So with the resolution, and I know that, we're on a time crunch here, but that resolution that's in our packet.
That is my draft for December 2nd. It was requested at the Hessel meeting.
Yep.
It's not specific on 2 or 3. It's whatever you all decide to attach to it and send it to BIA.
And that's what I'm,
Yeah.
that's what I'm asking, because we have 2 different, we have the red line version of some of this and some of that, and then we have the original, well, you said it's not the original 2008 or 2012.
Yeah, you have my red lines. The red lines are based on a 3-branch.
Okay.
If we can figure out substantially the 3-branch language, some of that can be plug and play into a 2-branch version. So it's easier to go into the 3-branch and draft it like that, and then go on that. That's what the survey came out as, and that was part of what legal department was charged with. So you can take that 3-branch language and then extrapolate out. If we end up sending a 2-branch, because that's what the majority of the board sends, we can we can take that out of the 3-branch and plug it into the 2-branch more easily once the majority of you figure out what language you all agree on the legislative language, the judicial language.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
It's Sean, Rob, Mike. Sean?
Maybe I'm wrong with this, but the 2008 version includes the Mackinac ban.
You're not wrong, it does.
Okay, well, I believe the 2012 version with the revisions doesn't. And if that's the case, if we pass that one, then we have to have a separate secretarial election to bring the Mackinac band in, which under my understanding initially would cost us money. But maybe the BIA
What do you
pays for
mean?
that.
I'm sorry, Sean. What do you mean by cost us money?
If we pass a 2012 that doesn't include the Mackinac band, then we have to make another amendment to bring the Mackinac band in. Why don't we just take the original 2008 version that the committee recommended, send that off to the BIA? Obviously, we're not the only tribe they work with. They've dealt with this many times before. They will come back with recommendations, reconvene the committee, whether it be an old committee or a new committee, to go over those recommendations, and then this board could vote on it with the people's vote. I don't know why we're wasting our time here. I don't think this is going to be done in 3 hours. The committee already recommended. Every other committee we have, when we get their recommendations, we vote, oh yeah, put that person on that committee. The Conservation Committee, hunting rules, they make up a rule under their committee, we vote on it, yep, they recommended it, we do it. I don't know why we're not doing that here with the 2008. The committee recommended it, send it off to the BIA, unedited, let the BIA come back with their recommendations and we move forward. I don't know why we're doing all this red line and,
Point of inquiry?
I mean, that's my recommendation, so that's going to be my vote.
Very clearly a point of inquiry. Who pays for secretarial elections under law?
The feds, the Secretary of Interior.
So he didn't know that before, so he does now.
So the reason that we've had multiple legal department drafts, this version, the version of some of the language in December and previously under other general councils, is because when you get to this table, we have trouble getting enough votes to send something right to the BIA. So every discussion I've had with this board since I've been in this role, and every discussion I had with previous general counsel when he was in this role, has been with the intention of staying as true to the Constitutional Committee's final work as possible, but trying to help you all get to whatever compromise that you need as the politicians to send something out to the board. So that's why there's different red line. That's why the 2008 draft was never sent. It's probably why the 2012 draft was never sent, right? So that's the short answer, Sean, which I know you already know, but that's why we're here again talking about more red lines, is because legal is charged. I too went back and watched the July video, and I didn't see it quite the same way as Director McGrory, but that's okay, and it's maybe my misunderstanding. But part of the discussion there was we're in a reset. We had this was languishing basically since January. We hadn't made any movement on it. Let's resurrect it, get the current legal department's eyes on it, and let them draft a version that you all can debate and see if we can work something out of it. So that's what we did.
Rob?
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to say that this was not the intent of that. So clearly, Brian and I got something different out of that. I did say in there the necessary components to separation of powers. Sean, to answer your question, the reason that this didn't pass is because the board's been pretty consistent since 2008 and 2012 that they would not move forward on a full rewrite of the Constitution, but would single out constitutional amendments. When you retract a constitutional amendment from a document, there's certain components that are necessary to make up each of those amendments. What we see here is what's necessary to establish a separation of powers with about 5 or 6 added controversial issues. Now, if we were to send this document out right now, people will not be voting on the separation of powers. They're going to be voting on, do I want my tribe redistricted? Do I want additional board members? Do I want the membership ordinance to be updated? The separation of powers won't even be the vote anymore. And admittedly so, some of the issues on here for me will probably turn into a no vote, which is wrong. It's not okay for us to do that to the membership who very clearly wants to vote on a separation of powers. They deserve the right to vote on a separation of powers, not take it all or get nothing approach. This would be, you can have the separation of powers, but you're also in order to get a separation of powers, you have to accept a variation of the board makeup. You have to accept membership ordinance update. You have to accept redistricting your units. Why should that be placed on the line when people just want a separation of powers? So I think we need to take this document as a board, right here in public, and go through it one at a time and take out anything that's really not necessary in a separation of powers. A lot of the stuff that was talked about could be legislated. It's not necessary to have it enshrined in Constitution. And some of the issues, like Sean mentioned, is a separate constitutional issue. For instance, the membership ordinance. If people want those protections for those members within the Constitution, that must be voted on separately. I'm not okay with this idea that we put something in front of the board member, in front of our tribal members, and say, you can have what you've been fighting for the last 20 years, which is the separation of powers. But you're only going to get it if we include redistricting and membership ordinance and stuff like that, and changing the makeup of the board. That's just not okay. We need to strip this down to a separation of powers, and that's it.
And Rob, I know we're not there yet because we're still on the issue memo, but that is what I want to do with the board too. I want you to go through and you all make the decision by majority vote, majority poll. I don't want the legal department to make all those decisions. That's not proper. And so that is all, we are aligned. I want that to happen too, right? And if we get there, I have in my draft I'll put on the screen, I've flagged all those areas that can be stripped down. But that's not a decision that our department should make. It's a decision that, as you said, right, you all should make, and I 100% agree with that. And that's what I want to get us to as well.
Right, Ryan, and I appreciate that. I think that's something we could do with this document that you have right here. And I was questioning where you were coming from yesterday, but with that answer, it gives a little bit better light that we can do that at the table. It's exactly what I did. I mean, if we sit here today and extract all of the things that are not necessary just to achieve the separation of powers, we're going to get very close to the document that I produced. But I understand the board was uncomfortable with just Rob doing it. So let's do it together. I mean, we can do it. We're going to end up with a very similar document if we only take out what's needed for the separation of powers. And I'm fine with doing that right here. But I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. That way all the members know, everyone on this board knows, legal knows, everyone knows. If we don't achieve that today, I'm going to do it, and I'm putting it on the December 2nd meeting agenda. I'm going to take this document right here, and I'm going to extract only the components needed to achieve the separation of powers, and I'm going to put that on the December 2nd meeting so members can watch this board vote on what they've been fighting for. So let's do it together so we all have a document that we're comfortable with, but let's stick only to retracting the things that are needed for the separation of powers. So I appreciate what you did here, Ryan, but at the end of the day, we need a document that allows our members to only vote on the separation of powers with no other distractions.
Mike?
Well, first of all, I Thank you for that answer. That last answer, I think, helped clears a lot of it up. It's unfortunate, though, that we got a whole lot to go through, though, because of that. I'm a little disappointed in that, hey, if we don't get to a spot today, that it's going to be on the December meeting no matter what, because then that, I mean, we're trying to make progress here. I agree with Rob, though. This has a lot of stuff in it that wasn't what the people were voting for, but I also understand your aspect that you're not the one making that call. It should be this body. So I think we have a lot to go through. I don't think we're going to get it done today, and if Rob's got to do what Rob's got to do. But getting back to the original concept of what we were on the first place was the separation there and those authorities and removing the chair from those authorities. And you're talking about best practices not being entirely of the board. So in your view, the best practices are what? Is it a mixture of? Is it comprised of everybody not the board? And are those paid authority positions? Are those per meeting things? Because that, I mean, we need to know what we're voting on that aspect too. So I'm grateful for the rest of the conversation because I 100% agree. It needs to be just the separation. All this other stuff, I think we could weed through it and get through it. I don't know if we're going to do it today. But sticking back on that one point then, if we're separating out the authorities and removing the chair from those authorities, and your best practice of, is it paid? Is it new people? What does that look like?
I mean, that's really, it's really a policy decision. I think how a lot of tribes end up doing it, it's a mixture, Mike, of council members on the board, whatever the authority is, and non-council members. The way this current draft is proposed, the council members would be unpaid. As long as they meet the qualifications of whatever that authority governing board is, they can put in to also be on the board. Whether the other positions that aren't the legislature are paid, that's a decision that has to be made pursuant to the code. The tribal council would get to decide that. I've seen it done multiple ways. I don't know if there's a best practice on that aspect of whether to be paid or not. But I think in tribal country, it does work well, in my experience, when the authorities over whatever entity it is are a mixture of tribal council members and non-tribal council members. Yeah. This is kind of a long list, Tyler. I mean, if I go through all these issues, you're not going to get to the Constitution today. It's not. I have no preference on how we proceed, but if you all want to proceed a different way, tell me. So.
Well, we're still going through the issues.
Okay.
I'm next on the list here. I'm going to actually ask you a couple questions because everybody else is asking you questions not pertinent to this one. So one of my primary concerns is, like, I want to see the judicial branch get separated out regardless, but I think the size of the judicial branch is way too large. That's where a majority of our cost is going to come from, and we had trouble filling one judge in our trial court that we have.
Yeah.
We have a non-native sitting in there. And to have 5 Supreme Court positions, I do not want any constitutional reading from a non-native person, and even more specifically from a non-Anishinaabe person. That's my serious concern there, is that we need to safeguard ourselves. I know we backed ourselves into a corner by making a majority of them board certified in whatever state or whatever they practice in for law, but I think we need to address that too, the size and scope of the court, and I don't think the board should appoint. I honestly think they should be elected to positions, but if they're not elected, there's got to be another methodology there, because then if we're appointing non-tribal people to our Supreme Court, then the board still has pull in constitutional readings in some capacity. But I really highly strongly recommend against non-native people and people not even from our region sitting on our courts. Navajo Nation's going to have a different belief system than Anishinaabe people, and then Sioux tribe members are going to have a different belief system than all other people, anyway. So that's one of my primary concerns. And then as well as the executive, like how does do we have a sub-chief? Like how does that work? I didn't see that in there, but it does diminish our authority at the federal level, not having that specified, because we lose a step when it comes to FACA rules and proceedings for any kind of government-to-government relationship. So those are two considerations there. And I don't think redistricting is a big deal. I don't think it needs to be involved in the Constitution. I don't know if I'm wrong here, but I believe the last time it was redistricted, there was no secretarial election to pull those areas out of Unit 5 to begin with. And the people in Unit 4, on my end,
Hopefully gerrymandered.
yeah, it was gerrymandered by the board, but it really should be recommended by the Election Commission.
It was the committee.
Yeah, and on my end, people in Unit 4, and I think Larry and Kim do a fantastic job where they can, but they're like 2 hours away from us. And Marquette County people, they don't feel like they're represented at all. But I welcome them into everything because it's such a mismatch over there. And I tell them that I'm representing them, but they feel like their voices aren't heard. So I don't think that's a huge issue at our board table. Unit 1 has 5 representatives. Every other unit has 2 representatives. Unit 5 has 1. Like, that is not representation, and if we add members anywhere else at large, and I'm for at-large member, I'm actually for a Senate structure where there are 6 units and each unit gets 2. That would be the most fair. That way it would be an equal voice across. But if we're going to go down to an even legislative division, I would say add the extra one in Unit 5 and we can address an at-large unit later. I don't think that's as controversial as people think it is. I also don't think it's controversial to protect the Mackinac ban and do it in writing. Like, those things aren't controversial. I think, 11 out of 12 of us voted to open the rolls. We've all fought for the Mackinac ban. They're enrolling daily. Like, that doesn't make sense to me either. So, but like Ryan said, let's start getting through this. Those are some of my concerns. I'm totally for a separation in some capacity, at the very least, getting our judicial system up and running, but I think the size is just too much, especially when we just, 3 weeks ago, we're talking about a budget crisis. And I think we're going to get to the budget discussion a little bit too later. And that's up for us to fix and manage, but we need to know what we're going to be managing and how it's going to be manageable. That's the responsible thing to do. You know, as Ryan stated, like, this is going to take more time than December 2nd to get it right. So why are we trying to ram things through? That would be my question. Like, let's work on this together to get it right, because there are a lot of flaws in this. And you know, maybe I'm the only one that doesn't see 8 seated judges in a court working, but I don't see it working under our current circumstances. I don't know how it's going to work. I would love to see it work, but we couldn't even get the 1 judge filled. So, I mean, that's a serious concern that we need to consider, is how many tribal applicants did we get for the judge, right? We had to search one out. So next on my list, I have Isaac Kim G.
Because I'm leaving. I'm not storming out, because that'll be all over the internet. But
You got to use your mic if you're going to.
I have to pick somebody up at the airport. We were supposed to start an hour earlier than we actually started, so I thought we'd be further along, but I do have to pick somebody up at the airport. I'll text somebody to see if you're still here when that's done, to see if it's worth coming back to, so.
Isaac Kim G.
Hey, Ryan, so we're working off the resolution that was passed on 7/15/2025?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's timelines in here. Of course, we didn't make the 30 days, but the 120 days, right, is December 16th.
I think it corresponded,
So if-
corresponded with the Hessel meeting. The day I sent you guys the drafts was the 120.
But this is the resolution we're working off, right?
Correct. The resolution in July kicked off this new version of what we're doing.
So it says to develop 2 constitutions, either a 2-branch, pros and cons for a 2-branch and a 3-branch. Put the survey out. So if we're still working on that, it's unclear to me if we have the authority to go for a 2-branch or a 3-branch if we're working on this resolution. And we only have until December 16th, so we have to either amend this resolution or draft a new resolution, because it clearly states that you're going to have it for the secretarial election within 120 days from July 15th.
So, yeah, there was multiple layers, as you guys remember. There was multiple motions to
Well, I
amend.
want to, if resolution is law of this body, we're working off this resolution. Is that correct or not?
That is correct.
Okay, so we got until December 16th to do something. You're supposed to present us with a resolution for a secretarial election on or before December 16th.
Can I go through the be it resolves for the membership and people online? So
Go ahead.
the first one was 30 days for a pro-con list. Check, we did that. Send it to a survey. Check, we did that, right? November 14th, they tabulated the survey. So the first be it further resolved, or the second be it further resolved is done. The two drafts of separation of powers, a two-branch and a three-branch, those are done. You have versions of those. I hope they're not the final. They're supposed to be for you all to work off of, right? Those are the legal department. Per this resolution, we drafted what we thought was consistent with the 2008 draft, with some changes, but more changes that are going to be needed based on consensus of the board. Then the third, be it further resolved, legal has 120 days to prepare a resolution for the board to request a secretarial election. That's in your packet. We prepared that resolution. Check. Be it finally resolved that at the expiration of the 120 days, if the tribal legal requests additional time to prepare the amendment, they'll be granted up to additional 30 days. I did request more time via email, wasn't in a meeting. No one answered me, but so we sent you what we had
So,
done.
Ryan-
There's nothing that mandates that at the 120 days. So we fulfilled our obligation. We got you the resolution. Whether you have to vote on it in that same time span is not explicit in this resolution, but now it's at your table per the
But it is
resolution, and
law,
it's your
though.
job to
It
decide
is
what to do
law,
with
though,
it.
once we pass it.
Isaac,
Yeah, but all the law. has
Other
been-
thing is,
he met the law, so please stop accusing him of not following his duties.
I am not accusing him. I'm just saying the resolution states, and that's the law.
And he just explained to you what the
So,
resolution
and that's
stated
our
and
law.
checked it all.
That's our law. Not his law, that's our law. We passed the resolution,
So what are you talking about?
so we got until December 16th
No,
to
we don't.
pass
He
it.
just said, it doesn't say that we have to pass it or deny it. The resolution was created. He fulfilled his obligation. That's the obligation of the law.
Second, my last question is, it says a two-branch and three-branch. So this resolution doesn't point you in either direction. It just says you draft the two-branch and three-branch.
It-
So we have to pass a resolution, whether it's a two or a three.
So you have a draft resolution prepared for December 2nd, whatever date ends up being voted on, to send to the secretary your draft amendments to your constitution. It is not explicit in that resolution whether it's a two or three branch. It's a very simple resolution that says the board approves this attached document, whatever you all decide is the one you're going to attach, and then it goes to the BIA to kick off all of that secretarial election stuff. But it doesn't say two or three branch, it just says the attached amendments. And whatever we get to, whatever the majority of you get to be your amendments, that's what will be attached to that resolution. You guys pass it, send it off to kick off the process for the secretarial election.
So the key is we should really decide if we're doing a two or a three.
I guess, yeah, that's.
And it
that's a
also
question.
states that you can add another 30 days if you need to.
Another 30 days, correct. Another 30 days.
Okay, I'm good.
Tim Gravel.
Okay, you all pretty much said what I was going to say about, I think it's going to take longer than just today, and I don't like the threat that if we don't make a decision today, a resolution will come next week for us to vote on. If we don't get it done today, then are we going to stay here late tonight? I know people get up and walk out at 5 o'clock before people are done with membership issues and whatever at board meetings. Are we willing
Well,
to
after
stay
5
late
o'clock.
tonight? Are we willing to meet another day during the week? I am. If it takes 2 to 3 days a week, then just to get it done, let's do it. Meeting 1 day a week for 2 hours, maybe, if we're lucky, to work on this is not right. And right now, I'm looking at this, I'm listening to everything that's being said. This isn't going to be decided on by 2.5 hours. I can just tell, and not only that, if this goes like it is, I'm seeing a $5 million price tag. Could be more, correct?
Could be less, could be more.
Be less, could be-
Holly
Okay.
has a better spreadsheet than I do. That was requested by Director LaPlante, and I told the board I'd update what Schlehuber had put together. It's very rough. The financial people can answer those questions way better than I. But yeah, there's a price tag to it, of course.
Okay, and I have sat here for months and got lectures about the budget crunch and voting on things that we passed that had a price tag on them, and then we get a lecture after it's done. And I'm all for separation. But it's almost like we're saying one thing and then talking out the other side of our mouth as we're putting a $5 price tag on this. And we're in a budget crunch that I hear every week. So we got to think of these things. I don't think we have to get it done in 2.5 hours. If we need to meet again, are we willing to say, next Tuesday's a board meeting day, so we have stuff on our agenda for the meeting that night? Can we meet again next week? And the week after, 2-3 times a week? Until we get this where we want to present to the BIA for review. Because when it gets to the BIA, it's not coming back to us in a week, it's going to be a couple months. Then it comes back to us for review, and it goes back to them with our recommendations again.
Right, once the secretary gets their hands on it, they will do a technical review, and they will send us their comments. Then we have to decide as a tribe what to do with those comments.
Right.
And then send it back to them. It is a process.
Sometimes it goes back and forth 2-3 times, so it's not, this isn't going to be a decision that's going to go out to the voters, I would say, within a year, before it actually gets to secretarial election.
Here's the point of information, that's
Oh, go ahead.
recommended. Send the 2008 version, let them come back with their recommendations.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's what they do, right? So if there's,
We're headed the cart right now, doing this. They could do it for us.
My only
we got to decide what we're sending them.
My only
So-
pushback to that a little bit, and this does not diminish the work in 2008, because there was a lot of work done, and I respect our tribal members and our elders who did that work. But over the years, many different attorneys and boards have identified substantial holes and areas that can be improved on that, which is why we've tried over the years to improve on that. And I mean, it might prolong the process with the BIA if you send the 2008 draft, just because they're gonna identify many of the same things that we and former legal counsel have identified, and we're right back here, which I think is why we, as a tribe, had tried to mitigate some of that by crafting some language we thought would plug some of those holes that we know that the BIA is gonna flag anyway. I think that's part of why we've done this process, because the BIA is going to send a bunch of stuff back, and then you're going to workshop it anyway. It's just, when do you want to workshop it? Now, or when the BIA sends the same comments that I sent you and Schlehuber sent you and Wernette sent you, right? Because it's going to happen. That's just the reality. So the cart's not really before the horse. The cart could be on the other side of the horse, is whatever the board wants to do. And I think the intent was to try to mitigate some of that back and forth with the BIA, but now we've been mitigating it for 20 whatever years, right? So
Okay, and
17
then
years.
Just 2 other comments. So the way I'm reading this and the way I heard Tyler say is the chairman will no longer we will no longer have a chairman. The Ogima.
Yeah, he'll be
I'd rather,
Ogima.
or chief.
Or whatever term you guys decide, yeah.
be the same.
And I agree with you, if you have a chairman or OGMA at the table, you have more pull than sending a board rep.
Right, so we would need a sub-chief or sub-OGMA
Sure,
or
whatever.
vice-OGMA, whatever you want to call it, because if he's not available for a meeting, or he or she, the leader at the time, we lose that tier in discussion. So when you're sitting with the feds and everybody wants to talk, they're going to go to the chief, president, and chair first, and then the vices, then all other council members, and then any other representative if it even gets to that point. That's just how it always works. So it does diminish our power as a tribe as well. So I think that needs to be in consideration that, you know, a president usually runs with the vice or something like that. I think Bay Mills or not, Little Traverse does that, right?
Little Travers does that. It's contemplated in the final work product and this current version that potentially the speaker of the tribal council becomes kind of what our vice chair is now, in a way. They would run the meetings, but they would also help fill the vacancy if need be if in the chair's office. It's kind of it wasn't fleshed out in 2008. It's a little more fleshed out in the version I sent you, but that's kind of what appears to be the intent, is the speaker of the council becomes that like second highest ranking government official.
Okay, and then one other thing, Isaac mentioned it, is we taxed you with the 2-branch or 3-branch, you did that.
Yes.
So now we here have to decide what we're going to work on. We got to pick one or the other, we can't work on them both. Let's pick one, we'll go with that. And then I keep hearing an overwhelming landslide by the voters. When you look at it, 24% is not an overwhelming landslide. And that's what I come up with when you have the 1 and 2 branch added together against the 3. So we got to decide what we're going to be working on here today so we can get something done and then make some more meetings instead of putting a deadline at 5 o'clock today to be done.
Just to answer you, Kim, the easy recommendation for that is to just give us an hour or two standing agenda item until it's done. We meet every Tuesday. If it's just on our Tuesday meetings, nobody can complain or nobody can dictate what days work and what days don't, or not answer Lana, who tries really hard to schedule. It won't kill us to just set aside an hour every week to get through this, even one bullet point at a time. We'd make a lot more progress than we've done in the last year. So, and I know we're getting through a lot, so that's not on any of you guys. So I have a list here. I got Rob, Sean. Sean, did you already speak? That was your point? Rob and Lana.
Okay, so I'm just gonna respond to a few things I heard, but I think, you know, Kim's right. Are we gonna get it done today? And my answer to that is, I'm paid to represent the will of the members. I do think this is a landslide vote. For those who participated in the survey, is a representation of what the tribe as a whole believes. And I think from talking to members over the last 20 years, I'd have to agree with what the survey says. You could say it's not a landslide vote, but if any of us got that vote in our election, it would be considered a major landslide. 3,500 votes to less than 2,000. That's a big gap. And then if you were to add 2 and 3 branch together to determine that people do want a change and a separation, you're talking about 84% of the vote that came in. That's a massive landslide. That's not even debatable. So a couple other things. I'm prepared to just make a pot of coffee and sit here till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, because this isn't something that, you know, that you're going to work through real quick, but it's also something that that our tribe itself has been working on for 20 years. So it's like, come on, guys. You're talking about revising a document here. It's not rocket science. I mean, we could go through it, get it done with. We don't need a standing agenda item. Let's just get it done with, and let's prepare something that strips this down to only the separation of powers. You know, someone said, oh, I don't like being threatened that this is going to be on the agenda December 2nd. That's not a threat. That's an absolute promise. Our members are sick of waiting on this. It's not a threat at all. The membership knows what the plan was to have them vote on a separation of powers. They knew that when they voted on the survey too. So to add things back into it right now, we need to strip this document down. As far as the budget's concerned of the courts, let's remember that had our members had standing in court, they would have been able to challenge the decisions we made to waive sovereign immunity on any one of the lawsuits that were plus $50 million. You would save the money just on allowing the members to contest our decisions in court. You would literally pay for the entire budget 10 times over. If we were able to stop, as a membership, was able to stop one of the drastic, terrible decisions that led us down lawsuits of some over $100 million. So I'm not concerned with a $4 or $5 million price tag per year when it gives the membership rights. Governing costs money, and governing right is going to cost more money than governing wrong. And when you add protections for members and add rights to members and give the members a say in the election process for 3 separate branches, it's going to cost more money. But that's money that your membership wants you to spend, I guarantee it. And that's going to come through with the vote. So I'm not too concerned with the budget. I think we save money in the long run by adding another check and balance to the legislative body who has clearly proven over the last 50 years that they will get us sued for millions and millions of dollars. Now, the judge makeup, I do agree a little bit with Tyler here. I think there needs to be a process when a tribal member doesn't choose to run for judge. But I also think the membership should have a choice, and I'm not too sure if the legislative should appoint. My suggestion when we get to that point is going to be that one or two things. One, we do have an appointment process that needs to be certified by the executive and the court. We'll have to work through that to figure out how it's going to work. But the other option is if no tribal member runs for election, or let's say one tribal member runs, then obviously they run unopposed and the position's theirs. But if no tribal member seeks appointment, then we could potentially have a non-tribal member election. I don't know how the members would feel about that. Or we consider working through an appointment process. One of those two things is going to need to happen. Redistricting, I'm not in disagreement with Tyler here. I think that redistricting could take place, but if you look at the Constitution, it's supposed to be in accordance with a census that determines representation of the members. I'm not ever going to support equal distribution of board members among units when the population is not even close to equal. The reason Unit 5 has 5 unit reps is because it's proportionate to the amount of people and voters that live within the unit. So if redistricting needs to take place to create an odd number of board members, that needs to happen through legislation and code. It's not necessary to have it in the separation of powers amendment, just like it's not necessary to have the membership ordinance in there, or even the makeup of the board. That's not something that needs to be enshrined in Constitution. And Constitution is how the government works, but not redistricting. We can't predict in a constitutional amendment how our members are going to move from district to district throughout the history of our tribe moving forward. So we shouldn't be placing it in Constitution to make it so defined that if a large portion moved from Unit 1 to Unit 2, that we wouldn't be able to adjust our proportionment of directors within that unit. You know, if 50% of the people move from Unit 1 to Unit 2, then I would agree Unit 2 needs more representation. So until that happens, I think that we need to keep this in code and out of a constitutional amendment. So that's all I got here. I'm ready to work through this. I'm going to put something on the December 2nd workshop for us to vote on, and it's going to be this document with everything stripped away from it that's not necessary for separation of powers. If the board intends to have something, as a majority intends to do something different than that, I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to deliver to the members the right to vote on the separation of powers. You guys can deny that to them on your own, or you can work through this document and have something that the board is generally comfortable with as a whole to move forward. I think that we do need to make a decision on the 2 or 3 branch government. I think the members made that decision for us. So I think we all need to quit talking about the 2 branch or the 1 branch. I think it's very clear what the membership wants. They want a 3 branch, and I think that's what we need to work through right now. So on December 2nd, if you guys think that it's not acceptable, just vote no on that resolution. It's not hard, but the membership been waiting 20 years. So from this point forward, they're going to have something on the agenda by me until this board can replace it with something suitable for them. I'm done waiting. I think our membership's done waiting. It's been 20 years, so every meeting from this point, we're going to be voting on a draft. It's going to be mine or it's going to be yours, but we're going to be voting on a draft.
Lana.
Yeah, and I know we have these 2 different documents in front of us. That was the very first question I asked you at the beginning. The one that's not redlined with everything in it, and the other one that's redlined. And I'm trying to make sense of that one because it talks about the legislative branch and what the speaker would do when they're responsible for. And it looks exactly like Tyler, and you explained a little bit that that would take the place of the chairperson. Ultimately, that's who would do it. They would call the meetings, they would preside over the meetings, and they would do all that. But then there's a lot of stuff crossed out in your red line. So I do agree, because I do agree with the separation, whether it's 2 or 3 at this point. Fair game and talking about it. But people are right, it does have to be stripped down to just that amendment, and that's separating out to a 2 branch or a 3 branch. And that document is something that we should have in front of us. And I agree that you did your job, you made your checklist, everything is done per that resolution, but something for a 3 branch, a 2 branch, a cost analysis, and what both of them are going to entail for us to make that decision, because Kim's absolutely right on the points that she made. In one hand, we're screaming that we're a $10 to $14 million deficit right now, and that's being told to us, not exactly by our executives though, but that message is being sent out there. And then we get a cost analysis that's going to be $4.7 million, a rough estimate. But then we hear chirping in the background that, no, it could be about 9 million. And I agree, cost is not, we have to work something out to get a separation. I want the court separated out. That's my very first thing, legislative and court. To be a 2 branch, whether if we vote for a 3 branch and a majority of this board goes down that path, then fine and dandy. But we do need that document with just that stripped right out and all the other things away, because people are confused right now. They're saying, I voted on the survey to separate, make a 3 branch government or a 2 branch government, but now all of those other things are in there. And that's what's in front of us right now, that we're talking about sending to the BIA. So I think, and I agree, we're not going to get it done today. But I agree, the very next time we meet, that's what we should have portioned out. So then we can decide whether we're going to do a 3 or a 2, and ultimately it's going to come down to the majority of the board. What the majority of the board wants, a 3 or a 2. But we do have to have those cost analysis for both, because there's questions in here. You have a 7-page document that we only got through the first 2 questions today.
Yeah.
7, and it's important for the membership to understand that. 7 pages legal has right here on questions about what we're doing and what we're deciding upon. And we got through A and B of the first page, 2 questions. So, because there's so much, even just sitting here. So anyway, that's where I think we should go. I think there is going to be a change, but we have to decide whether it's going to be a 3 or a 2. And that has to be a clean copy in front of us with the cost that goes with it.
Go ahead, Ryan.
And I know we're sidetracked, right? We didn't get, not sidetracked, but we didn't get through, right? And some of these are not questions, they're just things to flag for the board. Some of them have already been flagged. Some of them are new. But I think there's a bit, and it's hard for the membership to see because we don't have the draft pulled up right now of the Constitution, but there's really not, in my estimation, that much to strip out. So we're getting hung up on the redistricting and how many board members. That can easily be in legislation, boom, the article is gone, you have 12 board members, you deal with the rest later. It's not ideal, but it works. The membership section, keep it the same as the current Constitution, bam, that's easy. The rest of the articles are your separation articles. You have Article 5 on down is the separation of powers, then you have the judicial branch, then you have the legislative branch. Take out the redistricting, everything else is substantially what you've all talked about and what has been in the final work product of a legislative branch. Then you have the executive branch, right? So most of this document, I know the membership can't see that yet. Maybe we want to refine this before we give it to them. I don't know. That's a board decision. But most of this document, I don't want the membership to be confused, is the bulk of these 15 pages or whatever in front of you is the language needed to separate. And a lot of it might look slightly different than what Director McGrory introduced in October, but it has this similar language. Some of it's cleaned up to be a little more precise, but most of this document is actually the separations. There's nothing added in. I do take a little bit of, I want to clarify that. Nothing's added in. This is all stuff that the Constitutional Committee wanted in, and we put some of that in this draft so it could be consistent with the resolution in July. It's not added in necessarily. It is maybe different than just the separation articles, but even back in December of last year, we had an all-day workshop, right, with former general counsel, and he talked about the separation language. We didn't get anything really polled that day. People didn't want to poll vote, which is fine, so we didn't get a ton of clear direction. But it was discussed by legal and by the board that you nail down that language, you still have all these other articles in our current Constitution that also will need to change because they don't work anymore in a separation. One of those is the resignations and vacancies. The newspaper article from the 08 draft, that can be gone. The elections article, you don't want that in there now, that's fine, that can be gone. Like stripping this down to what is necessary for a separation is not, now that this is in front of you, it's really not that hard to do. If you want me to do that, and I can send it this week. I'll just delete all the stuff that is not strictly necessary to the separations. It's not going to be. It's no longer going to be consistent with the final work product of the Constitutional Committee, but the legislative, judicial, executive branch will be, and then the rest will be slightly modified versions of what's in our current Constitution. That because it won't work. It's not plug and play. It won't work that way.
All right, before I call on the next one, do you want us to just poll vote on whether or not you're doing 2 or 3, or do you want to work on them simultaneously?
I'd rather not work on two different drafts anymore. No, I wish the board to get a consensus on what separation that they're going to vote on.
Do you think a poll would be good enough, or do we need to formalize this in a board meeting?
I think doing a poll today would be good, first step. Yeah.
All right. Isaac, then Rob.
Hey, Ryan, any of this information's public anyways, right? Since it's an open meeting?
Yeah, and several of you asked me if we should post this, and I said, that's not my decision, that's your decision. Post it. This is not going to be the version that gets sent, but yeah, this is all public. We're talking about it in open meetings. It certainly can be posted on the website as well.
Rob?
I just want to agree with everything that was just said here. I think we're finally working down the right direction here. I think we could poll vote to give Ryan some direction, but if it is something that is binding, it does need to be in a board meeting, but we're just giving direction to an employee, and we are in an open session where our members can hear it. So I think that's, I think it's acceptable.
Yeah.
Not have Ryan continue down the path of working on multiple different things that no one's clear on. The other thing is I'd like to reiterate, I am okay with sitting here till 1, 2 in the morning to work through this. And Ryan's right that the document he has here is consistent with the 2012 document. And so will it be if we remove the unnecessary things for separation of powers. It's still going to be consistent. The idea is to allow members to vote only on the separation of powers. I'm getting messages the same as Lana. Members aren't happy about it. They know what they voted on the survey. And they're going to look at this document and say, why do I have to vote on everything else that doesn't have to do with the separation of powers for me to vote? So I think we could pretty much end discussions right now and just start working through this document. I'm prepared to sit here as long as it takes. I would, I'm not trying to strong arm the board. I'm just saying the members are sick of waiting. That's why I'm putting something on the December 2nd. So if I'm going to be honest, I would rather have it be something that this board's comfortable on, voting on. That's only the separation of powers. I am going to dig my feet in and make sure that only the components necessary for separation of powers gets into this, what we vote on. I won't vote to even send something like this forward until we have it stripped down to separation of powers only. And again, to Tyler's point on redistricting, I think that needs to happen within code. I'm not opposed to it. It's been a long time since we looked at it. We haven't had a census in compliance with the Constitution in a long time. So before we make that decision, I would like to know the real current numbers of the units, and that's for a later discussion. That's not necessary for separation of powers.
We got Kimley, then Bridget.
I will just say that with all of these documents, I'm not even comfortable polling until we get something in front of us that I'm not going to state or give anybody hope or false hope that my opinion is going to be what it is until I see the accurate documents. Because, again, then it's the board said, right? So, or Kimberly Lee said. She said it on this day, somebody's recording it right now, and there it is. So until those documents are in front of us, I would rather see how all of it looks, even if it does take a little more time, which I know that's not what the membership wants to hear. I know that's not what certain directors want to hear, but I am not comfortable polling and giving anybody a false narrative. So that's all.
Bridget.
So Ryan, can you explain, with the constitutional amendment in 2010, with the separation of the chair and the CEO, what is going to happen? Does that trump what we're doing now, or the other way around, or how, does that still need to be figured out, or where are we at with that? Because I know that is an issue.
If we get to the point where we're sending a 3-branch amendment, that will take precedence over our 2010 amendment that took out the CEO powers from the executive, and it will place back in some of those CEO powers back into the executive. Does that answer? So if this passes, if the separation 3-branch goes forward and it passes, then you have an executive branch, you have a president, and you have a Congress, and you have a court system. And that president, Ogama, whatever we want to call it in our structure, essentially becomes the CEO over the government part of our tribe. Not all the economic part, but the government part. And they can take over the day-to-day operations and oversee all the departments and implement all the laws and they become our CEO essentially.
Well, I guess that's a problem for me. because the members already decided, and that, I think, was like 84, 87% of the members at that time that decided on that separation. And with the way things are going here, I don't think that would be a good thing to put one person in charge.
They would have veto power, yep, and then the tribal council will have an override power. It would be our version of the state and federal checks and balances, right? You pass a law, it gets signed into law or it gets vetoed. Yeah, all those things come into play, of course.
So the OGMA would be the CEO, whether that be who we have now or in the future, somebody else. They would be the CEO. So those executive level positions that we have, they would no longer be. Does that include the CEO for the casinos as well, or just governmental?
It would just be, it's one of the numbers here. It's 2 and 3 on my list, but yeah, we get a slight restructure. So just the government.
That's
the government
important to know.
The government executives would, instead of reporting to the board, would report to the chair. And the Kuwaitan executives, CEO, CFO, would continue until the law changes, if it ever does, to their authority, the gaming authority. Enterprise CEO would go to the enterprise authority. So your key employees no longer are, we already started doing that a little bit, right? We've separated out which authority is over which key employee, but it restructures them. And so your executives don't answer to the board in the same way. None of the government ones expressly would answer to the board. They'd answer to the OGMA, the chair.
And that's the executive power, so OGMA is what we call him, but he's truly the CEO of governmental.
In essence, yeah, they become the CEO of the governmental. They are the top of that chain. No longer is the board the top of that chain.
Kim Gravel.
And if I read this right, it would take 9 board members to overrule a veto. Is that correct?
Yes, it's 3/4. Is that 9? Yeah, 12, 9, yeah.
And there's 4 spots in this that gives them veto power. Did I read that correct, or was it 3? I thought it was 4.
So it should, I'll have to go through the draft. So it should only be mentioned twice. It should be mentioned once in the legislative section that the tribal council's actions are subject to veto. And then in the executive section, it also talks about their veto power and the votes necessary for tribal council to override their veto.
Okay, and I'm with Bridget on, in 2010, the membership did vote to separate it. And it was a good percentage, so I'm for the 2 branch, so. I don't know if Tyler's going to poll or not.
Lana?
Yeah, and I will say, I think everyone sitting at this table is for separation of powers. It comes down to, because I hear things or I get phone calls. I try not to read as much as I can on Facebook because sometimes it's not accurate and it's hurtful. But I do get phone calls. And, every board member that I talk to is in support of some kind of separation of powers. So I think we're all on the same page there, which is fair to everybody. How we do it and how we go about it is the second question. But, Tyler brought up a good point, and, people can say that we're filibustering or we don't want change or whatever, but these are real issues that we're going to face when we do make these changes. And one is, we didn't have 1 non-tribal judge. We had 2 because we couldn't get any tribal judges. So there's got to be some kind of form to fashion when we do separate out the judicial, because that is my main priority in our whole separation, is having a separate court and for it to work for the members. So I don't know if the language that we have is going to be sufficient, how we have it written, how, the committee wrote it, because that was a different time 20 years ago, too. Maybe we could get, tribal member judges to apply for jobs. We know for a fact right now that we haven't had it in the last 2 times. Not saying that they're not doing a good job, but, are we going to be able to have a court with the rules that we make? So, I don't know if when you're thinking about this and when we're going down that path, because either way, legislative and judicial are going to be separated out. The big question is whether it's going to be the third, the executive, if it's going to be a 3-2. So we got to think about that, how it's going to work once we pass the law, because right now, we barely got a judge in there. You know, you guys worked on that for a very long time. We put somebody in place, it didn't work out, we had to put somebody else in place, and like I said, he's doing a good job, but he's non-tribal, you know, and if you're watching this, sorry, and that's just the facts, he knows that too, as well. But, so, once we change the law, we have to be able to enforce what we change. And that's a responsibility that we have as well. So, I just wanted to say that. I don't know if you could come up with.
And so right now, I mean, Tyler brought it up, Rob brought it up, and Lana, now you brought it up. Right now, in the language, the chief judge of the trial court, the associate judge of the trial court, and the chief justice of the Supreme Court, those are like the three that get elected by our membership. There's caveat in there, if no tribal member runs, no Sioux tribe member runs, the chair, I'll just use our current terms, the chair can appoint and the board of directors affirms. So you have both branches coming to an agreement on who sits in that chair. The associate judges are much the same, that there is an appointment process that goes chair appoints, and it can be populated by a non-native attorney, and then board of directors has to affirm that appointment. So that's the current language, that's kind of your check. So the people get the power to elect some of them, specifically, right, the two highest, the two chief judges, and then there's an appointment process for a fallback if the election can't happen because we have no tribal members, or there's certain positions at the associate justice level that are also appointed by the OGMA, by the chair, confirmed by the board, and those. I think some of those are the ones that maybe you were all discussing. Are there too many? Because it's a 5-person Supreme Court right now, as drafted, and so you have 5 on the Supreme Court, and you have 2 at the trial court level, so you have 7 judges.
Okay, I appreciate that breakdown, because that does.
Or 8 judges,
Yeah, so.
whatever it is. Sorry.
Okay.
Well,
Seven?
There's 7 plus any additional associate judges needed.
Right, so then there's the ability, if we have later, we need a specialty court of some kind, or a new court is created. That's all future way down the line, maybe, but there's the ability to potentially have to appoint other judges for certain circumstances, similar to how you appoint a special counsel or hire a special counsel for certain things.
And the judicial is going to be the most important branch we have to get it and get it done right, really. You know, because legislative and executive, they're always going to, even in the other tribes, they have their problems with a 2-branch, they have their problems with a 3-branch, but judicial is something that we have to get right when we do it, so.
Yeah, and as I had mentioned, like, my primary concern is having a non-native make constitutional decisions for Native community. Like, it's just empowering the paternalistic approach of this country and what's always been done to us. So there has to be something secure in there. I'm going to suggest this, though. We need to get through this, at least a portion of it today. So let's take a 10-minute break and reset, so we can reset the discussion and get back on to your questions. So we're going to come back at 3:15. Thank you. We're going to call the workshop back to order. It is 3:17 PM. I have a list still. We're going to call on Rob, then Bridget, and then we are going to get back to Ryan's discussion.
Okay, a couple things to address here. The first thing is pointing out the vote count in the 2010 constitutional amendment. I'm glad someone brought that up because we're not going to go down the road on one hand of validating that election, but then somehow invalidating the survey election, because I think Bridget said the numbers were over 80% in favor of separating the CEO duties from the chair. But it's important to note that less than 20% of the members voted in that election. So the vote count is actually higher when you consider that members overwhelmingly supported a 2 and 3 branch government at the tune of 84%. And more members voted percentage-wise in this election than they did in the 2010. So if we're going to point to that election and say that was overwhelming, you also have to assume that this survey election was overwhelming. You can't say the same thing, two different things concerning two different elections when the numbers are that similar and different at the same time. So we had more percentage vote in the survey election and a wider gap for constitutional reform than there was in the 2010. Now, to address the issues of the 2010 constitutional amendment through secretarial election, that was to remove the CEO powers from the chair because they had budgetary authority. So that's going to be different in this, and this would supersede it. There's nothing in our Constitution saying that the members can't re-amend the Constitution. Remember, anything we do right now, in 50 years from now, if the members don't like it, they can still petition and have it changed again. So I'm not going to point back to 2010 and say that's the direction of the members forever. It might have changed, which is good that we had this survey, because now we know that the members' view on a separation of powers did not change. It's still 84% in favor of. And, you know, don't try to discredit this election if you're going to point to the 2010 one and say that that's overwhelming. You can't say that's overwhelming without agreeing that this one's overwhelming. It's just impossible. You're a hypocrite if you do that.
Hey, that's enough of that.
No, don't tell me that's enough of that. I could say what I want.
Rob, you're out of
not,
order.
you're not going to. No, you're not going to tell me how to speak, Tyler. You're not going to.
You're
That's
out of
period.
order. Thank you. Bridget.
You're not.
Okay, I'm not going to debate it other than a couple comments. 36,000 ballots were sent, or 36,000 ballots were sent out. That's an amount of eligible voters. So what numbers came back is nothing overwhelming to me when we're talking about 36,000 members. Either people didn't want to vote because they didn't care or whatever the reason. I'm not going to debate all these numbers because at the end of the day, you have an opinion, I have an opinion, and 35,000 other members have an opinion as well. I am going to say this, though. I know that we're talking about separation of powers. I'm about separation of powers, like Lana said. We all are. It's just getting to that without everything being rammed down our throat, being, bullied or, calling and, oh my God, you have to do this or you have to do that. That's not a way to work together, for one thing. That just puts roadblocks up in the way. But I am going to say this. We need to settle this MAC band thing. And if we're going to be doing this amendment, we need to settle it. We're the majority. Mackinac Band is the majority of this tribe now. So we need some protection. As far as the separation of powers, I think that we should be, Slailberg had mentioned it, when we were reviewing this, about the other tribes in Michigan and other tribes across the country that had 2 and 3 branches and what happens in those, and some had regrets and whatnot. And I know I out at NCAI, I talked to some people, and they also had made comments. Why aren't we reaching out to some of these other tribes before we go forward and seeing what we're, getting ourselves into? Because if we're going to just sue each other all the time and not get anything done, not that we get a lot done here because everything gets rammed down your throat instead of us working together and coming to a common goal. But I'm not going to be bullied. I don't care by who it is. I don't care if it costs me my seat. I'm going to do what I think is best. And the people that might tell me something might not be all the ones that are on social media. They may be people in the community or whatever it is. I just think that this is a big issue, and it's been going on for 20 years. I've been sitting at this table for 14, and there's a lot of things that I haven't liked, but it doesn't mean that I can push it forward. Doesn't mean it's going to be settled the way I want it. But I'm just going to leave it at that. I just think that we should do our due diligence. And even if it's the tribes in Michigan, get some people here, tell us what's working for them, what's not working for them. This is just a complex issue. It isn't, okay, yes, 2 or 3, and then it's done. It's like they said, stacks of paper we have of questions that are outstanding on what's going to need to be changed. It's not flipping a switch, like Ryan said. There's a lot more to it. So anybody that just wants to say, December 2nd, we're moving forward and this is the way it's going to be, it's not going to be. This might take until 2028, who knows? But to ram it down our throats, I just don't think that's the way to go. And then what happens if we have a pile of crap, and then who's going to be responsible for that? I'm just going to stop there.
Yeah, point of information, Rob was out of order. He refused to quit talking, so I had him muted, and he jumped off and left the meeting. So just want to put that out there for everybody. Ryan, you can go ahead and continue. Hopefully we can get through some of these points. We're now down 3 directors.
Okay, the next few ones I don't need direction on. I'm just going to flag them. I think they were flagged before. Number 4 is the legal department. It's going to have to change because the legislative branch, however they end up looking, is going to need their own attorney, and the government attorneys cannot advise the chair and all those government departments and the legislature. It creates ethics problems. We've already talked about that, so I'm not going to belabor that point. We talked about number 5, which is the CEO position might have to change because the chair will be at the top. It's an implementation thing. We'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. Number 6, I think I have my direction on that. This was about the Constitution, the Election Commission, whether they should be a constitutional body. You talked about it with Schlehuber, and I was going to come in front of you this year and make my recommendations. It was going to be to make them a constitutional body, but that is not strictly needed in a separation, so we can skip that one. Number 7, general litigation things to consider. We've kind of belabored these things in previous discussions, but to flag them again, disenrollment, opens meetings ordinance, what's propriety, what isn't, a bill versus a resolution versus a motion versus an ordinance. All these things we're going to have to just talk about as we implement a separation, whether it's a 2 or 3 branch.
So I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So with the membership having standing in court, would we also need to implement a public defender for our people? Because, if they're going to be held accountable or liable in court, and they can also sue us back in some way, shape, or form, or file employment claims and things like that, what is best practice for tribes usually?
So for civil suits, so a tribal member wants to sue one of the branches, the executive or the legislature, for something that they think is an impropriety, whatever, something they don't agree with. Generally, they have to get their own attorney. If they are There's more substantial Bill of Rights that was proposed by Rob and by the Constitutional Committee. It's in my draft as well. And some of those are criminal in nature. We may have to build out a more robust public defender system for those criminal defendants. I haven't seen it a lot where the tribes will pay for an attorney for a civil litigant, someone who's suing based on like a law that they think is unconstitutional, et cetera. Those are usually the petitioner has to pay their legal costs. It's something we could consider. There's nothing legally to prohibit it. It's out of the norm, and that would be another thing where I'm sure your CFOs will have to weigh in on what that would look like. But generally speaking, best practice would be let those people get their own attorney if they can afford it. Or if they can't, then they have to litigate themselves.
I'm talking more like along the lines of employment claims, right? So wouldn't the employment claims, instead of coming to the board or the committee to review the appeal process or whatever, wouldn't it go to the court system?
Yeah, probably. Under this separation, those would probably go, so not an appeal from a termination, but if you're suing us for wrongful termination, something like that, yeah, that would go to our courts. Same thing, I haven't seen a lot of governments, tribal or otherwise, that give someone an attorney for those. There are legal aid services. Maybe we could craft our own Sioux Tribe legal aid for low income type thing. But even so, most governments would not pay for an attorney. Even in those instances, the person who is suing would still need to find a way to pay for their attorney, or find some low income program if they're low income for someone to represent them.
All right, thanks. Well, I'm just curious because I think the only like public defender services we have are for like ICWA and family cases, right?
Yeah, and criminal.
Yeah.
Yeah, criminal matters, and then the child welfare matters.
Right.
Yeah, election proceedings, housing placements, waivers for gaming licenses, denials of assistance from programs, things that will have to be fleshed out on how those get dealt with in a separation. A lot of those things would land on the board's table now, right or wrong, but that isn't always appropriate in a separation. So we have to flesh out their legislation, how to deal with these things that are going to inevitably pop up. Number 8 is the removal process for elected officials. Our current vacancy and removal process kind of shoots everything to the board because we have one branch. The 2008 draft didn't really flesh that out. It stated reasons that people could be removed, and that would happen in tribal court. We've tweaked our draft language a little bit in that section, but most of that would have to be done through should be done through legislation, or else you're going to have a really giant constitution. Number 9 we talked about before, so I'll just briefly, another good time to talk about administrative hearing procedures. We've talked about it on and off over the decades at Sioux Tribe. Really good to have these if you have a 3-branch government, or even maybe a 2-branch government. Nothing in the current drafts. Either the ones that I reviewed from October that were submitted by Director McGrory, or the ones from 2008 or 12 have anything that mandates how often the tribal council meets, except for there's some language in the 08 draft that says you'll meet once a month for 7 days straight. So that's something just doesn't have to be in the Constitution. You can keep it the same as you do now, but tribal council will have to figure out how much they want to meet. My current draft gives them the power to create their own rules. I think that's appropriate, and then they could decide how often they want to meet, and it would probably all fall into Chapter 14, our parliamentary rules. Number 11, Tyler, I believe you asked this in addition to the financial questions. This is not detailed. This is just very cursory. Some of the very obvious codes that are going to have to change whether we get any kind of separation. Chapter 10 for elections, membership ordinance may have to change. Referendum probably should change now. We got to tweak that, but that'll probably have to change if we tweak anything like that. If you guys recall, sometime last year, I can't remember the date, but the Elder Advisory Committee came in front of you all and said, please use the 2012 Constitution as your baseline for anything moving forward and focus on the referendum as your First Amendment. That was their recommendations. So I don't know if we want to, referendum can say the same. It's not strictly what needs to be in separation. But I flagged it because that's what was discussed with the Elder Advisory Committee last year. Parliamentary rules, removal from office, I have it twice for some reason. Gaming, criminal procedure code will have to make sure it covers all the new Bill of Rights. Tribal court is a big one, that's gonna have to change because you have a whole new judicial system that we're building. Same with the appeals, because you have a new version of a Supreme Court. Housing Authority, Enterprise Authority, and Gaming Authority. I flagged those because they'll need to change for best practices to figure out a different way to populate all their different governing structures. And open meeting ordinance, I said it earlier, it should be on this list, but that would have to be looked at. There's probably more. All the codes are going to have to be thoroughly reviewed, and the ones that are inconsistent with whatever version we end up adopting of a separation will necessarily have to change. We have like 65 current enacted ordinances. All of them would have to be reviewed, redlined, updated. Some of them might not need a lot. Some of them will need a bunch. Right? That's a project for an implementation, but that will have to be done. Same thing with all of our policies for the different entities, chain of command, termination, grievances. There's probably more. Those are just the kind of the top ones that we flagged right now. Should governmental policy still be with tribal council? In the current draft, it still falls there, but is that appropriate if the chair is over all the government? A lot of these are implementation. Number 14, we got to flesh out, so we give them standing to sue in court, tribal members, that is, and presumably on employment-based lawsuits. We want to flesh out all this legislation of how that would play out in our court system, but employment-based lawsuits can really bog down a separated government, so we want to be real careful in fleshing that out in legislation. Number 15, I think I have my direction.
Brian.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Isaac? Isaac?
Sorry about that. Hey, Ryan, all the code changes can be done once this is shipped to the, or at least a portion of it can be done when this is shipped to the BIA.
Correct. Correct. I would probably advise, once we get a draft that's going to the BIA, then we focus on like the real big ticket items that are going to need the most revisions, and we have those ones, like the tribal court, the criminal procedure, the open meeting ordinance, the parliamentary rules. Like, we have drafts of those ready to hit the ground running, because you don't want to stand up a separated legislature and then have them potentially bogged down with a bunch of implementation. We want to have some of that ready to go right away, right? So.
Hey, Ryan, one other question. If we do come to some type of agreement and we're going to send the revised constitution to the BIA, can't we also pick a date when it's going to be implemented on our side so it gives us time to update those codes?
We can do some kind of delayed implementation, correct. I haven't put a lot of thought into that specifically or how to structure it, but it's something we can certainly do, yes.
Are you good, Isaac? I think he's good. Go ahead.
Yep.
Number 15 is this was in the 2008 draft. It's not necessary for separation, so I'm guessing we want it removed in the next draft I send you. It's the newspaper was a constitutionally created entity, something that we can determine later if we want to. The last one on this list is just flagging it in line with all the other things that will change in our day-to-day. Workshops and meetings are going to look very different. Tribal council, board of directors will not be over every single entity or key employee. So our Tuesdays are going to start looking a lot different when we eventually get separated.
Bridget has a question.
Okay, I know that there's been talk about, it's the board that doesn't want to give up their power. And I know that there's board members here now and here over the years that probably abuse their power and become dictators and whatnot. But what's going to happen when a tribal member contacts us as legislators? There's really nothing that we're going to be able to do for them at that point. But it looks, according to this, they will be able to call the OGMA, okay? But if, say, the OGMA doesn't like them or, decides not to talk to them, at least if members don't like us or they think we don't like them, they have somebody else they can go to, too. So I think that, I don't know that a lot of them fully understand that they're not going to be able to really call their board member when they have, nobody's calling them back from employment. They've applied for this program, for that service, that we're not going to be able to really help them in those matters anymore, especially on the government side. So I don't know, is that what they want? Because they call us now to do that. And I think some people might pass that information along. Some people might get more involved than they should. But I just want to bring that up.
So I have a similar question. So like in tribes where this happens and we're supposed to be responsible for the budgets, how do we get reports on what we're budgeting? Like how do we understand the operations? How do we understand what's happening day to day? How do we make legislation to change laws on something that we don't know whether is working or not other than membership complaints? And then the other thing that I was told to be aware of and make sure that we have some kind of protection mechanism is how do we make sure to not have executives become political appointees? Like what is the protection there? Because one tribe in particular, actually in the state of Michigan, pulled me aside at NCI and directly told me that has happened.
So the first question, I'm sorry, Tyler, repeat the first question.
How do we receive reports, full understanding of day-to-day business, and responsibly pass budgets? So Congress in the United States, they have hearings, and everybody is able to be pulled into a hearing regardless of who they report to understand what they're doing, right? And that's kind of some kind of reporting mechanism. Like, how do tribes do it that separate that way if the executive's in charge of it? And that for us to do our financial stewardship, our fiduciary stewardship for the tribe, for the programs, we do need to have reports. We do need to understand what is happening. We need a thorough reporting. Otherwise I wouldn't, I would be hesitant to pass a budget regularly.
So the current powers of the OGMA, the chair, the chief judge of both the Supreme Court and the trial court, they have an obligation to submit a budget. So the budget, they have to send a budget to the legislature. They have to pass that budget. The day-to-day needs or things that are or aren't working in a separation, there's the chair would presumably want to go to the legislature and say, I need more money or whatever it is, and this isn't working. If that's not happening, what a lot of separated governments do is give like a subpoena power basically to the legislature, and you can drag you can drag the chair or an executive in front of you and like Congress does, right, and demand answers and ask them questions.
So I would say that we would want to note and capture that I don't know if everybody's in agreement with me, but like that is something that we should be doing, right? Like if something's not working or something seems afoul, right? And
Yeah.
Then my other question is, how do we prevent people from becoming political appointees? So say a new administration comes in after this is all said and done. So say a new administration comes in after this is all said and done and then just cleans house on us and puts in a bunch of people that they're friends with, maybe not qualified for positions. How do we prevent things like that from happening? Like what can we put in to safeguard that from happening?
So originally, one of the drafts that legal was working on, I think it was maybe pulled from the 2008 version, was like the chair's staff would be political appointees, basically. And when the chair either resigned or was voted out or whatever, all those people that were their staff would leave also. The way that I've currently drafted it, I understood that was maybe one of the holes based on your talk with Schlehuber. So the government employees, executive on down, they would be subject to our HR policies. So the protection would be in policies, not like 100% protection, but the chair would not be able to just clean, in theory, would not be able to just clean house, but they have to follow the HR policies. And we have a lot of protections in our government HR manual. So we're not supposed to be at will. We can't just be fired by the chair. So that's how the current power of the chair is worded in the draft that we'll eventually get to at one of these workshops. And it even references the HR policies, I believe. I'll double check on that. But that'd be the protection right now.
Complaints go back to the court system then?
If something is done outside of policy and that person is terminated, then their recourse is the court system, right?
I would just like to make sure that that's strengthened just to be safe. I got Rob, then Mike.
Yeah, that's already outlined within the draft. The protection would be the HR policy and then redress from the court. So the chair would not have authority just to clean house. Those employees would still fall under HR policy and protections of HR, and those protections would be guaranteed by the court. The other thing that I have to point out here is that those separations with the idea that the chair is going to have ultimate authority is not true. The job of the legislator is to establish policy and law that governs what the chair does in terms of how they carry out the executive branch. So the way to get around the way to ensure that there's not political appointments is for the legislator, the council, this board to determine protections for those employees, and to also legislate that the chair cannot select someone who's not qualified for a job. So I think that there's a little bit of confusion saying that the chair is going to have this outrageous authority. The chair's authority is going to come from the membership. The membership votes in the chair. But the laws that they operate under are going to be the laws of the legislator, council, board, whatever you want to call us, that's reviewed by the court. So we build the framework that the chairman operates within. His freedoms in his authority and discretion comes with how he chooses to articulate how each of those departments function within the law that we create. So we still will have a great deal of influence on how those operate. Now, to Bridget's question, what about the members who reach out to us? Nothing should change. We should honestly do the same exact thing as we should do right now. We can't take any action to help a member outside of a board meeting anyways, so all you should be doing when you field questions from membership right now is directing them to the proper department that can answer the questions. If you want to help them, or you see something wrong in policy that needs to be changed, it should happen at the board table. So we shouldn't be this body that members can just reach out to whenever they want to get special favor, nor should we view ourselves to be that. We are policymakers. We are legislators who draft and create law. And our job is to advocate for our people on a city, state, and federal level, and involve ourselves with workings with the local governments to provide benefit to our people. We are not liaisons, and we do not have the ability to manipulate policy outside of a properly noticed meeting without 5-day notice to our membership that we're going to do something specific for one member that we can't do for all members. So we really shouldn't be viewing ourselves as someone who could field a question from a member and then take action within the executive, whether we're a 1-branch or a 3-branch government. That's simply not our job, and it's abuse of power. So nothing should change there. If you field a question right now, it should be the same process as if you field a question in a 3-branch government. Direct them to the proper channel, or establish policy or legislation that changes what their issue is, if it's the right move. That way it changes for all members, and you're not doing favors for one member. So nothing should change there when you get a call from membership.
And if you'll notice, going off what Rob just said, in the draft that I sent you, some of the drafts that we were working on previously, based on the 2008 and 2012, the powers were kind of hidden in all these different paragraphs. Both the legislative powers and the executive branch powers are now, and it's a big list of enumerated powers. It's all in one section instead of kind of spread out over multiple paragraphs. It's something Schley-Hubert flagged, and we had been previously working on. And it's continuing into this draft. So the powers of each branch are much more clearly defined. All the powers that were already kind of scattered throughout the old drafts are there. They might be reworded, but they're there, and they're substantial forms, just in an easier to read format. And a lot of them are what Rob said. They're built in that way on purpose. So,
Mike?
Okay, along the same lines then, is all policy fall under legislative, though? Because some of that's going to fall under executive. And an executive order could probably, for specific, you said all the government employees are going to fall under executive. So we can have legislative, right now, it's blurred lines, right? I mean, the board's all, so when we do policy, it's said that we do laws, right? But we actually do policies too. Under this, does some of those policy questions, are those executive now? You're saying that they're spelled out, but I could see where some of them would fall under a legislative branch, but some of them probably going to fall under executive branch too. And so I think that's going to muddle, I mean, unless it's specific somewhere, but I could see where there's going to be interpretation issues and executive order issues, and I guess it's going to get hashed out in court eventually. But, I mean, are all policies legislative in nature, or do some of them fall under the executive branch? I guess would be my question.
So the way that it's set up right now in the ongoing draft is all resolution, ordinances, codes, laws, policy is set by tribal council, and the power that the executive has is to implement and follow that policy that the council, that the legislature sets. So the way it's currently set up, and if something substantially goes to the BAA, the executive can't create policy. They can only create procedure to implement in line with the policy that the legislature creates. That's how it's currently, the board doesn't lose their power to create policy, and it does not give the executive the power to create policy. That's not how it's currently worded, and it's not my understanding of the other drafts, how they were worded either, but it is something that we flagged in my issue memo, if that's the direction that this board agrees with, so the executive basically, they can run the show, they can implement all the laws, they can't change them, and they can't change policy. That's all still with the board of directors.
I guess under that same notion, though, we also can't enforce anything, though, under those, because that's the executive's job is to enforce it and.
Yeah, you don't, yeah, the board loses their enforcement power because the executive can enforce the laws.
Yeah.
If they aren't being enforced in the way that the legislature intended, if we build in subpoena power, you can drag the chair in front of you, ask them why they're not doing it, or, right, which is typical in a separation of powers, the legislative attorney sues the chair's attorney responds, you got a lawsuit.
Okay, thank you.
Rob?
I was just going to basically clarify what Ryan said, that those duties are already spelled out, and the board would have retained the task of drafting policy, and the chair would be able to determine how procedurally that works out, unless the board determines also procedure through policy, then that would still stand as the policy. So this idea that the board gives up overwhelming authority to the chair is not consistent with this draft, and I think that the Constitutional Committee did an excellent job to make sure that the board is still in control of policy and procedure, or policy and law, which builds the framework that the chair can operate in. It's not like we're just handing carte blanche authority over to one individual. I think the separation of powers works because we're dividing the authorities of government and how they work together. Right now, it's one branch. This board does whatever they want, and whatever we say goes. The whole purpose of this is to create the checks and balance system and give more authority to our members through the electoral process of the court, and the ability to have 3 separate branches that each have individual jobs that interact with one another. But this is our check on the executive branch, is that we set law and policy. The executive will set procedure. Now, if he's not following procedure, that's when we go to the court. So it's an avenue for us for redress for the executive as well.
Any other questions? Keep going.
That's all the issues that were in the issue memo.
I do.
Well,
Yeah.
did you want to go?
Yep.
Well, go ahead.
I was gonna ask that question. The next couple of pages here, Ryan, is the cost, that the rough estimate that you have to about, the rough estimate was about $4.7 million for just the separation. So, and that's all we're discussing, is the separation. And that is not a concrete amount, you said. But my question would be, if we do the separation, does it include that first, the tribal council increasing to 3 board members? Would that be included in?
It's included in our estimates, but if we're not doing that, just, you can ignore that number.
Okay, so that one would be out. Okay, and that was my main question, but I would hope that you talk about, and I don't know, Holly came up here, so maybe she has more that she's going to say too about what the estimated cost is going to be.
Oops, sorry. I don't think I have any problem sharing it because all estimates, I know it's based on some current salaries, right? But so typically we wouldn't, some of this has there's no names, but there's current salaries, and maybe we wouldn't normally do this in front of the membership. I think it's important for everyone to see this, and I want to make sure the board's okay with me pulling this up. There's no names, but there's going to be some idea of what
Is
people
there
might be
anybody
getting
opposed
paid.
to this being made public?
No.
So,
There is no opposition.
okay,
Thanks. I expedited that for you.
thank you. That's my, I think it's an important part of the equation, so let me try and make this a little bigger, hopefully, and not cut anything off. Yeah. Come on. Does that get everything in there? Yeah, okay. So if we we can disregard if you want the top portion. If we're not going to increase board members, that 334,000 is, Holly thankfully refined my numbers for me based on more actuality. So we can not worry about that as an increase. So the executive branch, legal department. So, okay, two branch. The first column, the 1.789 million, that's a two branch, right?
Yeah.
And then that just shy of 1.4 is an estimate on what it would cost for a three branch. You're gonna need a couple more positions probably in whatever the government's, the general counsel's office or whatever ends up being under the executive. And they would presumably still advise all the government entities. They would work out some kind of agreement to also advise COADN and all the other business entities. But you're going to probably need another body or two in there. So that's what this is what this estimate is designed to try to get an approximation of. Are there any? I'll let you look at it. I don't want to go through each line, but.
So the executive is an additional 1.7?
Yeah. If you go to,
8?
if you go to the two branch, we're estimating for the current legal department, that we do not have the capacity to probably handle all the additional tribal member-driven lawsuits. So you're adding, we estimated 2 more attorneys and all the benefits and all the supplies.
Because this is executive.
And three branches is a little less because you're spreading that out over 2 legal departments, right? So this would be the increase to, let's just say the current legal department stays substantially in its form, adds 2 more attorneys. This is approximately what it will cost the tribe to do that. We estimated a 1-year projection. We didn't estimate beyond that. Yeah, it's just like the year 1 projection of separating. The reason it's a little less in a 3 branch on the H column is because you have, in a 3 branch, you, as the legislature has their own ability to hire counsel, and they would need their own attorneys. They would need at least 1. The size of our tribe, I'm guessing you probably need 2. And so they would be the 1-year cost of that, supplies, equipment, benefits, all that jazz, just shy of $900,000 to stand up year 1, the legislative attorney's office, whatever we end up calling it. And this is because we talked about it before, but ethically, our office, if we are retained in the executive, we can't ethically advise the tribal council in a separation. You need your own counsel. You need your own legal counsel to represent the board of directors. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. There's too much legal ethics conflicts.
Any questions so far? Can we get this in our email, please?
This
Yeah.
is different, yeah, than what we have.
We'll send it out to you guys. Yeah, it's different than what I sent out and much better detailed. So the big ticket item, of course, for standing up a separation of powers is going to be your court system, whether it's 2 or 3 branch. It's going to be a substantial cost because you're adding. We have all these positions, like we have a chief justice, right? We have a chief judge, but we don't pay them a full-time salary. They're on contract, paid a rate that we negotiate. But you're probably going to need them to be more full-time actual employees. So that is the assumption that we worked under in creating these estimates, because they're going to be hearing more cases. And probably a part-time contract person you call in when you need them isn't going to cut it, especially long-term with a separated government. You need someone that's there managing the court at all times. Thank you. I don't.
Mike?
I'm glad that we got that thing from Holly that you just forwarded, but could you update your memo, though? Because your memo was just in layman terms rather than just a budget sheet. You had it all totaled out and all that, but you had it with the other board member stuff in there. Could you update that? Or would that be too?
No, that's easy. I can just plug Holly's numbers into that format. I don't mind doing that if there's no objection.
Because I liked how you spelled everything out on there like that, and not that I don't like looking at statement sheets and financial sheets like that, but it's easier to explain to people when you have something like this, so.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. And this, I think this estimate, right, comes down, I think my estimate was 4.7 million-ish, roughly. And I was overestimating based on these numbers. So yeah, I'll update my memo and get it out to you guys. So it's not an astronomical cost, but it's just something we, Director LaPont, you asked for it, and we do agree that it's an important thing to just consider because we're going to have to plan for it either way, right?
Bridget?
This may not say it in this document, but if we move to the 3-branch and if the chair, would they be paid the CEO salary or would they get the current salary, or is that a decision we make, or how does that work?
Yeah, we didn't try to estimate chair office increases. That's something that was hard to anticipate. We could put something together later, but this was done pretty quickly based on the request last week. We might want to make sure we had something that gets a baseline. The constitutional amendment draft leaves everyone's salary, council, board of directors and chair, at whatever they're set at currently, and then the board of directors has the ability, to appropriate funds and change salaries and all that stuff. Same with the judges. Initially, if we stand this all up, their salaries are going to be based on whatever they're currently making until the legislature changes that, because they have the purse strings and a separation, just like you guys do now. But there probably would be some cost to the chair office. I don't know if it would be more than the current staff or not. It's hard to guess on that. The chair would want their assistant. They might want another support staff, but it's that one's hard. That one's hard to know. But I can certainly, Holly and I can put our heads together and think of something.
Lana?
Yeah, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, because that, and I know that the draft constitution, when you were saying that, when I was rereading it last night, it said that the salary for legislators in the executive office stays the same, consistent with what it was, 20 years ago. So that is cut and dry. It doesn't increase. Which makes, for legislation, I can completely agree with that, and I'm not advocating for anybody to get a raise here, but that doesn't make any sense for the CEO in the executive branch, because they're actually the CEO of governmental, and I understand earlier, the casinos and the enterprises will also report to the OGMA, and then they'll have all the understaff under them.
So not under, the way it's currently drafted, the Kuwaitan reports to Kuwaitan Gaming Authority. We have a code already. They don't go to the OGMA. They don't
Okay,
go to the
so-
chair.
and
Only governmental employees go to the chair, not business entities.
So the legislative body will still be the gaming authority?
For now, until the law changes, yeah. That's how our current code is set up. But we were talking about earlier today, that's probably something we need to look at. It's not probably, it is something we need to look at. Because the Constitution does not, the amendment to the Constitution as drafted does not currently empower the chair to sit on any of the authorities, but the board of directors still can sit on those authorities. So we have to tweak the law slightly, but until that it's completely changed, yeah, the legislative branch, the board of directors, sits over those authorities still. They are those authorities
The
still.
gaming authority still, they'll be the legislative body with the separation, but they truly won't have a separation if we're still the gaming authority and the gaming commission. So,
Yeah.
That
Well, that's what we
doesn't
talked
make
about.
any
We've talked about it in our current structure. We're trying to separate. We're not
Right.
really doing it best practice wise because you, the board, are over everything. You just put on a different hat. You put a different hat on, right? You put on your KGA hat or your enterprise authority hat, and that's not necessarily best practice, even though there's not a legal prohibition on it. But those are things that as you implement a separation, you, meaning the board of directors, as they revise laws, will want to probably look at whether they want to keep that the same. We talked earlier today about having some kind of hybrid where it's some board members and some non-board members. But that's all implementation, and it's not something that has to be spelled out in the Constitution. It's code changes, right? Did that answer your question, Lana? Sorry.
it just fills me up with a couple more, but, I mean, I know we're getting to something, but, yeah, I'm good for now.
Yeah, so I mean, this is just what I was getting at, though. Like, we have such a large court being proposed here.
Thank you.
I think we should look at the size of the Supreme Court, look at the size of the courts in general, and try to gradually ramp up, because we're going to have to get the funding from somewhere. And we're struggling to stay balanced as is now. Like, today we heard, hey, we can balance this budget out pretty easily. But now we're adding another potential $3.8 million that we don't have, just, and other costs may be associated. So I think we should talk about how that looks, as we move forward, especially since that's such an important piece for everybody here, because they have rental space, whereas you had, they might need a new building, right? And then do we allow them to hold Supreme Court meetings virtually? Like, those things all need to be hashed out. Any other questions on the budget, the financial piece?
I got one.
Larry,
My whole thing's been.
Mike,
Sorry, I don't have.
microphone.
Jim, you stole mine? My whole thing has been the cost, whether it be 2-branch or 3-branch. With our deficit, can we afford this?
So the estimate that I provided to you now with the numbers, and Ryan had them up on the screen, I think that was roughly 3.8 for the 3-branch, slightly less for the 2. With this, I would ask, how are we going to pay for this, right? Because even with our current situation, we should always consider increasing our revenues, reducing our expenses, or a combination thereof, in order to make sure that we can sustain long-term. So in the short term, maybe we could utilize some reserves, but I would not recommend that we do this without looking for other ways to increase our expenses. So the numbers that I presented to you include salary, wage, fringe, maybe some office space, computers, and things like that, and they were only projections for year 1. That was working off of some limited information, but what they don't include are, one question that I did have is some of the remedies that would be provided under, like, tort and those types of things. There could potentially be judgments. They certainly don't include any judgments. They don't include any building modifications. If we have to go in and change space, there's a lot of things that aren't factored into that amount that still need to be considered and looked at. So potentially in the short term, maybe, and that was just a 1-year projection, but I wouldn't recommend that we look at that and say, oh, we can absorb this every year going forward without looking for ways to bring in revenue to cover the costs.
So in your opinion, can we sustain it or can't we?
Not in long term, I wouldn't say, no, unless you're comfortable getting down to a point where we have minimal savings.
So then what comes next? Do we eliminate programs? Do we eliminate jobs to be able to afford this? If we can't find any other money, where do we go? Is COLA part of this? Every year, there's up to a 3% COLA? Is that all added in? Probably not.
That was just a one-year projection.
Well, in 5 years, in your opinion, can we sustain this amount?
With everything status quo.
Yeah.
With everything as is, we have no new successful businesses.
I would not recommend
Answer is no.
entertaining this for the long
You're
term.
saying no.
Without increasing revenue.
Thank you.
Ryan, are you,
Ask this real
You
quick.
gotta find more money somewhere if you
Can I ask
separate
this
either
question
version.
then?
Either version.
How many years before we're bankrupt if we went with this as status quo and we didn't find any more money?
That's not something we're prepared to answer today, Larry, but certainly, yes, we understand your point. There is a short and long-term financial cost. Every government who has separated has had to figure out a way to fund it. This would be no different, except that we're bigger than the other tribes in Michigan, and maybe it costs us more money. So the tribal council, the board of directors would have to find the money somewhere, and whether that's cutting things or whether that's finding more grants or hoping our businesses do better, you gotta increase the money coming in because more money is going out.
I mean, that's common practice there. I'm just asking for the membership. Where do we stand? As of right now, this will not work financially in long term with the way things are going.
I think Holly said that no, she would not recommend this
Thank you.
financially.
That's all I really needed right there.
well, she mentioned something that I want you to expand on, Ryan. What is like the max tort claim or liability claim in our courts? Like, what would that be?
Let me look, like, we have it capped. I'll look.
He needs this.
Oh, sorry, Ryan.
Oh, you go ahead, Bill. I'm going to pull up a code and check something for that question, so just give me a minute.
Okay, I think to Larry's point, and it was showing this morning as well, we're starting 26 with a deficit budget for 26. We're trying to end 25 with minimizing the deficit that we already have. So going forward, unless, maybe with the court, we could get another grant or something to help pay for the court costs, but we're already facing a deficit. This will add to it, so it can't be sustained, frankly.
Thanks, Bill.
I think this is what they were alluding to earlier anyway.
Yeah, I was looking for a simple yes or no, and it sounds like we can't sustain this.
No.
So it depends on, there's not a set number I can give you. We do in our code, of course, we have sovereign immunity. So we've only waived tort claims for specific instances. So you're not maybe going to get a flood of new tort claims. We don't see a lot of them now. But we limit the attorney's fees, and we do limit by formula certain other judgments. So there's a cap. I'd have to look at the formula to get you a number, and I'm not real math-minded. I want to do it on the fly. But we do cap, we purposely cap, just like the state does, just like the feds do, on damages, so we aren't going to have to out-of-pocket a ton of money in a tort claim. And our tort ordinance has worked pretty well for us in that respect over the years. And we would have to look at this to see what might need to change. But it's not like we're going to flood the gates with a bunch of new tort claims just because we separated. Our tort ordinance is going to work substantially the same way it does now with a few tweaks. And so we can still, the board will still be able to limit those damages and reasonable attorney's fees and all that stuff.
My biggest concern is this. We run out of money, we start cutting services. We start eliminating jobs, then what? We just sat here for a year, didn't want to cut a job, didn't want to cut a service, but yet we want to add 4 million to a deficit that we just heard from 2 CFOs we can't sustain.
Was that a question? Are you good? Okay, thank you. I got Rob and then Lana.
Wow, I found it very peculiar that we're now concerned with cost when our membership watches us throw away money. We just heard a director say that we have a CFO in front of us telling us that it's not sustainable. Let me remind you guys that a year ago, we had an EDC director telling us that we have $3 million in golf courses and over $200,000 of lost revenue every year. The same director voted to keep the golf courses. We just spent $2.4 million on tiny homes, 6 of them with a homeless crisis. We have $6 million
Rob.
over budget.
Rob,
for a
you're
health
attacking board members right now.
center. I'm not attacking
You
anyone.
will maintain decorum or you will be muted again.
I object to that. What
Where are you
kind of
objecting to?
government? The fact that you are not letting me talk about real things that happen within our tribe.
Talk
because
about
our
the issue on the floor,
You
which is the
campaigned on transparency,
constitutional
sir.
amendment.
You campaigned on
Mute.
transparency, sir. Let me.
So moving forward, the discussion on the floor is the constitutional amendment process. Talking about the budget in front of us, talking about the documents that were presented to us, not about the past history, but moving the tribe forward.
You're a
So if we
clown.
can't do that,
He's a clown.
I've already asked him to be muted. He's out of order, so,
You're out of order.
okay. Go ahead, Lana. All right, anything else? Let's take a quick break. Do you want to start working on this constitution?
I'm here at the pleasure of the board. I don't want all my staff to have to stay late into the night, but I certainly don't mind staying a little bit longer. If you guys want to work through it, that is your call, and as your general counsel, I will be here to assist. So we can start going, so if we take a short break, we can at least maybe go through the sections that, quote, aren't necessary for a separation, and I'll just like bounce around the draft and show you those and get no objection or a consensus, however we need to do it, of taking those out and sending you a revised draft.
Is everybody good with
At
that?
least start with that.
That way we can get some progress done today? All right, let's take,
Yeah, and you know how to mute the
let's
truth.
take a 10-minute break, come back, compose ourselves, and we'll go through what Ryan had suggested. Thank you. We're going to give Ryan a half hour here to get through the stuff to remove. Lana's looking right now at her schedule next week to see what can be removed from next week to continue the discussion as well. So she'll do that. Ryan will continue through this.
All right, let's start the preamble. The first thing I would like direction on, it should be easy in theory, is are we using Anishinaabe? Are we using English? Are we using Ogama? Should I stick with the term, what terms do we want to use for the chair, office, et cetera? I think you suggested president instead of Ogama.
Well, I thought we were gonna, once we get to that part, but I thought we were gonna keep as much as closest to what the committee did as we could. Not that everybody agreed with it, and I definitely think we should keep our language embedded in this Constitution as much as possible.
If there's no objection for now for this draft, I'll keep the preamble from the 2008 draft.
But so what you said you were going to do is just go through everything you need to strike
Yeah.
that doesn't include a separation of powers or that's not needed, which means that those sections will stay as is in our current Constitution, correct, for the membership's purpose?
Correct. Yeah, correct. If we're just
Yeah.
focusing
So
on
everything
just
that
the
you're
separation.
striking from this amendment stays as is in our current Constitution, and we're only looking at separation of powers.
But before we send it to the caveat is before we send it to the BIA, we will have to tweak some of the other
Yes.
sections.
Yeah, but we're not there today.
Correct. So this Article 1 sovereignty is different. This is not necessarily needed in a strictly a separation. We can use some of our old language in our current Constitution. This is added language. I mean, this is new language. Can I, for now, strike this out so we can focus just on the separation language? Well, it's go off the clean version of the one that doesn't have the red lines. 'Cause I was making notes as we were talking. These are my notes from today. There should be a clean version of a 3-branch in your packet somewhere. And that's the one I'm going off of, so we can figure out what isn't needed in a separation. I know it's confusing. There's a lot of paperwork. Yeah, one's a 2-branch, one is a 3-branch. I don't know what, I don't have the packet in front of me.
It is not the one that has the numbers in the lower right corner, so it would be the other team version. Oh, sorry, they both have the down. Hey, I have numbers. If you.
Go to page 3. Article 5.
Separation of powers?
Yep.
Yep.
Keep the one that has 3.
Yep. Thank you, Michael. Go to page 3, of whatever draft you're on. No, page 3, Article 5.
Yeah,
Separation of powers.
they're both the same.
No, they're not.
One says legislative, one executive branch, and one judicial branch.
I just thought the actual titles you were talking about.
So Article 1, sovereignty. This doesn't need to be addressed with separation of powers. It can be addressed at a later date, and it will stay as is in the current Constitution. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't really have a sovereignty clause like this, but if we want to focus on just separation language, this one does not need to happen right now.
The whole article?
The whole article. Yeah, we're gonna potentially strike out a bunch of articles and get you guys just the quote separation articles.
Any objection to this?
Okay, no objection to that one. Bill of Rights, I think we need to keep in just because we're giving tribal members standing and we need to have some kind of statement. So I would leave the Bill of Rights in.
So Bill of Rights stays in. Okay. Next.
Territory and jurisdiction, I'll double check what our current language says, but this does not have to be in this form. We can use the current constitutional language is sufficient, does not need to be changed for a separation. So we can take out Article 3, territory and jurisdiction, use our current constitutional language.
So removing territory and jurisdiction, maintaining current constitutional language. Any objection? We made it through 3.
Article 4, membership, same thing. This is not needed to change in a separation. We can keep our current language in our current constitution.
Any objection to, we got an objection from Bridget. Bridget, you want to speak?
I just want the Mackinac Band in there.
I understand what you're saying, Bridget, but our survey was just on separation, and if it's not has to do with separation, I think we'd have to deal with it at a different time. We were just dealing with amendments. I think if we convolute it and put it in here, then we're voting on 2 things, which, if that's what we're going to do, then we need to restructure entirely what we're doing here, right? So.
I think personally that we need to just look at Ryan's recommendation. If we want to change it, we're going to meet again once we all have an opportunity to go home and study this. Otherwise, we will be here until midnight. His recommendations on what needs to be taken out to create that separation, and then when we come reconvene, we can talk about how we feel, in my opinion.
Bridget agrees, so we'll remove membership, maintain the current language in the current constitution. I would, however, want to make sure that if a Supreme Court was to make constitutional decisions, that there's some kind of blocker there or protection for MACBAN. So whether that be through resolution or whatnot. So think about that.
I'll make note of that.
I will remove this from my thing, so membership stays as is.
Separation of powers, Article 5 stays in, right? We're separating powers. That one stays in. And I'm gonna work under the assumption of a 3-branch, because if we figure that out, we can copy and paste what needs to go into a 2-branch. Just, okay.
Yep, we want both, though.
Yes,
Yep.
yeah. Article 6, judicial branch, stay in.
Yep.
Of course. Article 7, legislative branch. So what we're going to, I'm going to remove potentially all this language about the Upper Peninsula's 5 voting units, the at-large voting units, the reapportionment and redistricting. Take all that out. That can be legislation anyway. But I'll need to leave here today knowing a number that you want, quote, tribal council to be set at. 12, 13, 14, 64, whatever number.
Kim Gravel.
Leave it as it is because that wasn't part of the survey either.
Okay, we'll leave it at 12, and we'll take out all that, all the different variations of the units and the reapportionment. We'll just say it's consisting of 12 board members. Got it.
Any discussion? No concerns? Move on.
Executive branch, got to leave in.
You have one, Tyler.
Lana?
So in the qualifications for tribal council in the legislative branch, we've changed some rules there. So is the qualifications going to stay in there? Because, I mean, that's the separation, but this one has no person convicted of felony And we just took that, didn't we just take that out recently?
We took it out of our code,
We
correct?
took it out of our code, so it's in this Constitution draft, so.
It is in this draft to be consistent with the intent and language of the final work product, but we can, if there's no objection, conform all the qualifications to match our current codes.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, I'm not the be-all, but yeah.
that's why, yeah, without, if there's no objection. It's going to conform to our current code, so yeah, the felony prohibition won't be there anymore. In the, when I-
We're still going to go through this.
Yeah, but in the
We're
next
just-
version, the next version that I send you will not have that language, and then we'll have another workshop.
All right, so continue.
Executive branch, stay in, did I say that?
Yes.
This one's a tough one, resignation, recall, removal, and vacancies. It's maybe not strictly necessary, but it's gonna have to change in some way with a separation. The current constitution won't work, and so I can leave this language in and we can debate it, or I can tweak our current language. The current language doesn't work. This is one that Schlehuber was gonna flag and that I'm flagging. This is one that as you separate, that article becomes inconsistent as it's currently written. It has to change somehow. And I've incorporated the different areas of the 2008 draft that talked about different recall and different percentages, and I've kind of stuck it all into one section here. I'm not married to this language, but this is going to have to change before you send it to BIA, because there's a legal conflict if we change the separation. So I don't know what you want to do with this. Leave this language here and debate it. Have me propose a different tweak to our current language. That's one that I need direction on.
Keep it in and debate for a later time.
Okay.
Any objection to that? All right, so we'll debate ad nauseum with that one too.
Newspaper, take it out.
Newspaper removed. Any objection to the newspaper, Article 10? No objection.
Elections, take it out.
Elections, Article 11. Any objection to that being removed? Mike?
Does that go back to, is this part needed for a separation in there?
So the elections being a constitutional, so we have election language in our current constitution, so we'll have to see what needs to stay and what is going to be in conflict. I'll have to look at that. But this as written, you don't have to create an independent election commission to do a separation of powers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so that will be removed. No objections? Seeing none, Article 11 elections removed from the proposal.
Article 12, sovereign immunity. I want to look again at what our current code is. We want some kind of sovereign immunity statement. So I'd like to leave this in, and we can debate whether we need to tweak it. We have something already in our constitution. We need something. It's good to have it, so I want to leave this in. It's not strictly needed, but we want it because it's important to make that statement.
Mike?
I guess if you're having a separation of powers, I think you're probably going to need a stronger sovereign immunity clause with an executive branch and a legislative branch. So I would support some kind of language in there if we're going to debate it at a different time. But I do think that we're probably going to need stronger language as part of separation.
And that language that's currently in there is a variation of what was in the 2008 draft. I think it's strong. It's important. Yeah, you're right, Mike. We do need it in there in some form.
So keep in sovereign immunity for debate at another time once we have the revised.
Yes.
Sounds good. No objection to that?
Article 13, referendum and initiative. We have referendum language. We'll have to look at whether it probably will still work on the separation. It's not, we don't need to change this. to do a separation. We can leave the current language and decide at a different day. So we can take this out. We can
Take it
take
out?
this language out and put back the old language.
So Article 13, referendum and initiative will be removed, and we will stay with what's in the current constitution.
Yep.
This is not necessary. Any objection? Hear none.
Article 14, amendments. We need some amendment language. We can keep our current amendment language. This, in 2008 and 2012, when it was reaffirmed, was meant to take out the secretary from our process so we can do our own constitutional amendments. But this is not one that has to happen now. This can happen later. So we could leave this as our current constitution states it.
So I kind of have an objection to this because when we discussed this, we thought this was necessary to make all the other adjustments that we've been discussing, like Mackinac Band and things of that nature, name of the tribe.
Removing the secretary was necessary. So you can, it's a choice. The tribe can choose. It's a choice that the BIA would probably agree with the tribe if they wanted to take them out of it. Removing the secretary from the amendment process is what a lot of tribes have done. It can make future amendments less cumbersome, or because you're doing it under your own elections process, not the federal election process. That's what this language is slightly tweaked, but it's basically the 2008 Constitutional Committee's language, and with the intent to take out the secretary. If you kept it in, the future issues like changing Mackinac Band or adding Mackinac Band expressly in the Constitution, or taking away or adding things, all that would be done through your own tribal election process, and you would you have to pay for it. The feds won't pay for it, but it wouldn't be done under their process. But it's not strictly needed to do a separation. You can leave the secretary in and make them do all of our elections.
Kim Gravel.
That's Article 13, right, you're talking about?
Yeah, Article 13.
So it says they may call for a special election to amend the Constitution by at least 15% of the eligible voters. How many eligible voters do we have? 36,000?
No, 39,000.
39? So we would need 25,000 people to,
Let's just round up to 40,000.
Or 3/4 of the council.
Or 3/4 of the board of directors, yeah.
wow, we could be changing our Constitution a lot.
Yeah, you need 6,000, yeah. 6,000 names on a petition if we left this in for the people, for the membership to ask for a change.
All right, are you guys objected to leaving this in? Because we can remove it. I just thought it was important to get all of the other stuff done we need done. So who's in favor of removing? Kimley?
I'm not necessarily in favor, but I don't think that, like I said, our conversation about all of this has to stop here. Like I said, I'd like to go home and review it as it is right now with all those removals or potential removals, and then come back and discuss what we are willing to remove or not, rather than say that that's going to be the end as well. So I'm not going to be finished with stating some things when we all reconvene. So that's all.
Okay,
I will have to.
Let's do a poll vote of keeping it in versus removing it, because I remember back to this discussion, the importance of this, because we're segregating the separation of powers this time, and that we didn't want to have to go back to the government once the checks and balances were in place. Like that's how I remember the discussion and why that was so important in there. I could be wrong, but I'm in favor of keeping it, but if there's more people in favor of removing it, let's just get this done so we can start moving it forward. Mike?
I do believe, sorry, Mike first.
Rather than just the remove or keep, I mean, could we put this in the debate spot, like debate later? because I think I want a little more time to review it too and to kind of digest if it's needed for separation of powers or if it's not. So I don't want to just make the decision right on the fly. I think I want to let it sink in and see what we actually need. So I would say the debate later.
Okay.
Is anybody opposed to a debate later on this one?
We didn't even have that many voters in the survey.
So we got a debate later for this one, so this one's in for now for potential review.
Okay. Do you want me to, how do you want me to present the amendments? Do you want me to plug it into our current constitution so you see how it all flows? Do you want just me to send you the amendments?
I don't want confusion among membership, thinking that any portion of our constitution is going to get removed unnecessarily. So personally, my recommendation to you is to plug it in the current constitution with the amendments added, showing that nothing else is removed other than what was discussed today, so that everybody has a clean version to look at and we don't have three separate constitutions to look at. However, the board also wanted a three-branch version versus a two-branch version, which I know that you said you just copy and paste over. So I think maybe clearly delineate in parentheses or something, 2, 3.
Yeah, I'll put at the top, this is the two-branch version, this is the three-branch version.
Any objections to that direction? So no objection, so there's your guidance for, hopefully next week you can get some of this done and we can have some discussion. Lana, were you able to find something to bump?
I had already given Dan the heads up that he may just have an enterprise authority meeting and not the workshop. So from 10 to noon, we can put this back on for next week if that is sufficient.
I doubt it's sufficient, but it's good enough. I get 2 hours. I
Well,
don't know.
well, you can actually have more time in the afternoon, so I will do you want me to just do the enterprise and gaming? I'll do 10, 10:30 for that, then from 11 until agenda review, we can have just this topic.
I'm good with that because we need to move this forward in a good way. We need to have this conversation. We need to have agreements, disagreements, and we need to get a clean copy for an informal review to the BIA. Like I think that's the next step for us. But we need to have the discussion. It needs to be a standing agenda item. It doesn't have to be 6 hours every week, but we need to commit some time to this. You know, we said we would commit some time to this. We need to commit some time to it. The only way to do that is make a standing agenda item. So we'll work around the business of the tribe in special meetings if we have to. I mean, we got to get through this. We at least made some progress this afternoon. So with that, does anybody else have any comments or concerns? Lana?
I just have a couple really quick things to go over with you guys. So December 9th is supposed to be our last regular workshop. You do have Unit 1, 2, and 3 Elder Christmas meal. For all of the stuff around that, you're supposed to also have a JKL meeting, and we do have to approve their calendar that day. I don't know if you're looking at trying to do this on December 9th as well, because we also had everybody's executive reports, but I have given at least a couple of them a heads up that they may just be presenting or submitting written reports for December. And then if you guys have questions, you can reach out to the executives directly. Are you looking for me to schedule anything beyond December 9th?
Bridget?
Well, we are possibly driving our elders up here for that holiday meal, so I don't know, we can't expect them to sit around. I don't know how long we plan on being here, so I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay.
And just so the board's aware, I don't know how Tuesday's going to go with our discussion, but I am not here on the 9th of December.
So just keep it executive reports, and whoever can zoom in for everything else. Just do regular JKL, executive reports, elder meal. You're going to get them in writing too, so. And you specifically, you have some health follow-up coming from James that day.
Do we have
Kim
to
Gravel.
do them on the 9th? Could we meet on the 16th? I mean, we're making our employees work, I mean.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, if we're
I'm just
just
kidding.
doing like the JKL meeting
I
and
just took the
the,
week of Christmas off.
and
I'm
the
here.
reports, the 17th, I mean, I don't want people traveling from the other ends, but they could zoom in for those and maybe just go till noon.
Okay.
I mean, it's,
No?
no?
I think we already told everybody. I think we already said that this was our schedule and that we were taking
Yeah.
December 9th was going to be our final date. So
Yeah.
I think employees need a break from us during the holidays.
Oh,
so
you're feeling
my
bad
vote
for
would be
them.
that.
I was feeling bad making them work and us saying, okay, we're taking the night off.
No,
I didn't know
they,
we were
they
that
would
bad.
prefer not to see us.
January 6th.
Look how happy Ryan looks.
I love seeing you guys. I love it.
Well, we'll get through what we can get through. We need to work on this. I'll leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Rumi: out beyond a field of wrongdoing and right doing, or out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. That's what we have to do as a tribe. We have to learn to meet each other there. Like, we have to have constructive discussion for this. Like, we know how important this is. We also know how important it is to keep the tribe operational and keep people employed and families fed. So we have to balance this. We know that we're on a tight budget, and I think we can still separate the powers, but we have to figure out how to do it affordably. So maybe it doesn't look the way we want it to the first time around, but a separation of powers is a separation of powers. And we have to come to an agreement so we can get this in front of the BIA and we can get it out to the membership. So that's all I'm saying. I didn't want any fighting today. There's really no reason for us to fight ever. We just need to be kinder to each other and understand that we're going to have different viewpoints because we're all fighting for the best interests of what we believe is for our people. That's why we're all elected to different units to have different voices and a different representative body. If we all agreed, we'd probably sink this tribe by this time because it wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be good to not call each other out for things, but we can do that in a kinder way. So I'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question before
Go
everyone
ahead.
goes? I sent you the 2026 proposed meeting calendar. I am requesting without objection to change the March 17th. All of the meetings each month next year are the first and third Tuesdays, just keeping them like that. There were only a couple people that went to that one conference in October. And I had March 17th, but now we just found out today that that's Mass Impact Week in Washington, D.C., so I'd like to move that to the 24th, and that's the one that I'm going to present in your packet next week.
I understand your intentions with adding those two, but open the door that, I could say I want Mackinac Island, they could say Newberry and Novice Way, and then Sugar Island and Kinross, and then we're back to where we were. And so if we're talking about, travel, and, I know we all travel, I'm just saying, I understand you guys got new community centers and you want those meetings, but it could open up a big can of worms with us going to adding all those back when we decided after COVID to go back to one in each unit. So, just gonna put that out.
I didn't know that.
Okay. Anybody else?
So the only other thing is we never schedule a second meeting in December, and I am requesting that the 3 months of 2026 that have 5 Tuesdays, because I do publish a workshop schedule for our staff so they know when they have to be prepared for things. I don't want to schedule anything on the 5th Tuesdays. If you can think about it and tell me if you agree with it or not next week. You don't officially approve the workshop schedules, but they are every Tuesday, so that's all I would ask. Amen. Well, no, I thought you meant to not be with you. No, I love being with you guys. So that's it.
All right, thank you. Well, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And
Happy what?
happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your time with your families. Happy holidays.
The recording has stopped.